Good evening, everybody. I um, had a really hard day at work. Um, so I'm going to do my best to not let that cover kind of bleed into the stream. But I think basically for the next month and a half, it's going to be really, really difficult. So we're going to be doing Warhammer 40K Rogue Trader. I should maybe mention, just as a prep, maybe what we can do at the start here is clarify. Um, okay, yes, we do have an update. I'll at least load in the screen and maybe I can do just preliminary remarks, planning out what the next few weeks will look like. I believe there is a plan for a Traveling at Night demo in August. So my intention would be to stream that as long as that's in line with what Weather Factory would like, which I don't think they'll have a problem with that. What else is I going to say? No local game dev meetup next month, so I shouldn't need to cut a stream for that. I believe there is a holiday on the 3rd. Let me actually just double check. Yes, August 3rd, I believe there is a holiday. So not next week, but the week following. I will likely take that for myself. But other than that, I don't believe there should be anything to get in the way of normal streaming. However, because I think essentially what I'm dealing with at work is so there's a supervisor who has not made it a secret that they personally dislike me. And this is now kind of creeping into sort of the performance evaluation and things like that. And, I'm not the only person who's had a hard time at work. It's just a crummy thing that's going to have to, I'm going to have to get through. I think I have a clear path in terms of what the, how I get out of this. But it does mean I'm going to have a lot of personal stress until that gets resolved. And I don't like bringing up too much of the personal stuff on stream, but I just recognize that is going to be something that is easy for me to talk about, in the first of what looks like 6 weeks of dealing with this. And I think at the end of it, because this has been months in the making, but realistically, I am at the point now where I am starting to embody some of that negative feeling. There's only so long that you can hear just this incessant, you're bad, you're screwing up, I don't like you, and not have that sort of alter the way that you think about yourself. So what I'm going to be doing, this is one of the reasons why I have been pretty clear on saying, for a while I've been taking the holidays because it's good to take the holidays. But realistically, I think it's really important for me to try and capture whatever, rest I can get. The fact of the matter is I didn't really have a weekend last weekend because I just been ruminating about this. Again, in one sense, I've already had a few months of it. It hasn't killed me. So, what's another month and a half? But on the other hand, I get the feeling that definitely the screws are being turned pretty heavily, specifically knowing that there's a finite period for this. So all of that to say, like I said, I didn't want to focus on the negative too much, but I think what will what I want to do is try and be as consistent as I can in terms of streaming. But I also want to recognize that there's going to be that need to take, like, if there is a need to take time, I want to take that time. So what I'll try and do is if I get a feeling that like things are getting a bit overwhelming, I'll try to telegraph as early as possible that I may want to take some time for myself. The best way for me to do that is social media, like on Twitter, but I realize that that's not the primary means of communication. Usually it is the broadcast itself for people. So where I can, I'm going to try and just announce it on the stream. I think, in a 6-week period, 9-month would be horrible. But over this period, I think, I'm going to do the best that I can to telegraph, but I just want people to know ahead of time that, I may need some time for myself. But with that in mind, I also want to try and work out a little bit of a schedule in terms of things that I might be playing. So if there's something related to traveling at night, I think that's going to sort of be the driver that's going to override anything else. So that means it's a little inconvenient to do sort of 2 RPGs at once, like Rogue Trader and Traveling at Night. But I think Traveling at Night is going to be the one that a lot of people are interested in seeing. I think on top of that, I would like to fold in 2 other games. So one, Uncle Chop's Rocket Shop. I noticed that one people seem to like that on YouTube, and so I'm going to try and work that in. And it's a little funny. I don't think one game for each day of the week would quite work. I think that's a really good way for me to flounder and not make a lot of progress on things. But maybe I'll do something like an Uncle Chop's week or something like that. Particularly if I'm feeling well rested and I can focus on some of what's going on. So obviously, the way I'm feeling right now has not necessarily, it's not necessarily, I don't know, it's hard for me to see how I can kind of keep the focus for Uncle Chops, given just some of the baggage I'm bringing back with me from work. And then I've noticed that people like seeing Zephon. And again, that's kind of based on YouTube comments, but I would like to, I think there's 2 things about Zephon, which is number 1, I want to acknowledge when people say they have, when people say that they have, that they're asking are you going to do more Zephon or something like that? I want to make a note of that and put it in the rotation. But I also kind of recognize that there is a gap between stream and YouTube. With that in mind, sorry, I'm going on it again. This is the trying to decompress after work sort of stuff. What I can see with games that I have access to today, Rogue Trader, Uncle Chop's Rocket Shop, and Zephon are going to be ones that I sort of take off the pile to play, depending on mood, at the very minimum. If there's a game that you'd like to see, and maybe especially if I have played it before, or you felt that I was going to play it, or I mentioned that it's the sort of thing that I wanted to play, do let me know. But I think those are 3 ones that I'm reasonably comfortable sort of committing to in terms of the next little while. If you want to see more of this, there's a realistic chance I'll put it in. I can definitely see a future where I maybe do Zephon on Mondays, and then we can do Rogue Trader on Wednesday and Friday, and fold in Uncle Chop's Rocket Shop in between there. But I do also want to be... I feel bad saying this over Rogue Trader, because presumably if you're watching, especially 10 minutes, if it's like YouTube and it's 10 minutes in, you're committed to watching this sort of thing. But Rogue Trader is one of the ones that I am really on the fence about, and part of that is based off of some of what Revived Snow mentioned in terms of their own experience with the game, and then just what I'm experiencing here. So we've had 2 sessions for this current playthrough. One was the tutorial. The second was the large part of the first mission. And I try not to be too disrespectful to the game as I go through, but I think you can kind of get a feeling of some of the challenges I run into when, having completed the encounter with the the end game encounter with the governor or whatever. I talk to one of the Adeptus Mechanicus, and I see a full dialogue tree, and I just sigh. And like, in one sense, that's what you want in a role-playing game, right? You want a big explorable world, but in another sense, like, you wanna go through all of this stuff and experience it, and you don't know. I think one of the things in particular, I'll point this out in the game itself, but I had the distinct feeling that I'd like missed out on concluding a certain quest based off of like a you needed to pick that dialogue option instead of that dialogue option result. And so this creates this sort of feeling that you're constantly being watched for the smallest infraction, and then the game will like fail you for your for not like doing it the right way. So it's the challenge I'm running into is twofold. This seems to be a very large time commitment. The concurrent views haven't necessarily suggest that this is a game that people are like really wanting to see me play. And that is not the overriding factor. It's one signal among many. But when I consider it displacing other potential games, so for instance, displacing Uncle Chop's Rocket Shop, or even something like Outlast Trials, which does actually seem to get some attention, I want to try and acknowledge the revealed preference there. And so with that in mind, as I frequently say, if you would like to see more Rogue Trader, let me know, because I don't necessarily mind having it in the rotation. But also if it's one that you're not like particularly rushing to see, that's helpful for me to know as well. Simply because this is one that I'm very much on the fence about. And again, it's largely a reflection of the fact that I am selecting this game over another one, and that can mean really mean that I feel like I may be making the wrong choice in sticking with it. And the obligation is never on the viewers to say what they need, right? But I just wanted to sort of be upfront that out of the 3 games, I should have mentioned Outlast Trials, maybe it's 4 games that I'd work into a rotation, but I maybe just wanted to communicate as clearly as I can that if there were to be a game that I drop from the rotation, and maybe one that I don't complete or I only complete on YouTube, Rogue Trader is the most likely one. So if you're here for Rogue Trader, it's helpful for me to understand that this is something you would actually like to see all the way through to the end. So now, if you'll excuse me, I just need to get some water. I think it's apparent in my voice. So I'm just going to be back in a quick second, and then we'll hop into the game. Right. We were dealing with a... All right, yes. The Lord Captain has received a plea to assess the actions of Seneschal Wersarian. As a result of Wersarian's decisions regarding a situation in one of the sectors on the lower decks, the problem now threatens to engulf the whole ship. Go to the site of the conflict with the Seneschal. The Lord Captain must assess the actions of Seneschal Abelard Wersarian. This requires the rogue trader to survey the situation in Depot 4. A junior officer subverts standard protocol to secure an audience with the Lord Captain. There is a problem on board affecting both the lower decks and the highest-ranked officer, Seneschal Wersarian. The situation is unusual and requires the intervention of the rogue trader. Okay. Oh, yes. I'll have to talk about this later then. Hey, it's Wersarian. Take that, scum! Look who it is, and all this is his fault. Abelard reflexively wipes the sweat from his brow in a startlingly human gesture, and a telling one. A rare moment where he allows his age and weariness to show through his armor-like veneer of self-assurance. The lower decks are a source of endless problems. Someday, I dearly regret we cannot replace all the locals with servitors. People dared to disrespect a senior officer. They would not have the chance to express such disrespect if we were not here, and if the situation had been dealt with by the relevant officers. Abelard grimaces. It's a junior officer's worst failing to pass problems up the chain of command. I have never been able to abide it. I shall say it again. It was a mistake to come here on Lieutenant Vent's whim, Lord Captain. I must admit that the lieutenant is by no means the worst material for an officer, Abelard adds peevishly. But in the name of Terra, the girl is the same age as my eldest great-granddaughter, and she has the gall to tell me how to manage the lower decks and hunt down cultists. It will be another 20 years at least before she can be trusted to act without oversight. Did you hear? They were shouting your name. Of course they were. The organization of the daily routine life of the ship rests upon my shoulders. The mountains of challenges and problems from which I endeavor to insulate you, Lord Captain. The situation on the lower decks has been a cause for concern, and I have intervened personally on more than one occasion. That is why they remember me. They do not know your face. To them you are akin to a creature of legend, one who has stood on the steps of the Golden Throne, no less, whereas I am the man whose name is attached to every order docking rations and lowering a bay's heating. Let us keep moving. We need to get to the bottom of this. Okay. So yeah, one of the examples that I wanted to give here, let's show completed quests. So the starport, when it says find out what's going on, so far as I can tell, I didn't want to go too far into the wiki on this because I don't necessarily want to, like, it's a tough one, right? You kind of want to know when you did something wrong, but, you know, I'll also have a private save of this for myself, and so I don't want to, like, unlock all the secrets or paths. This is one of the challenges, in my view. I mean, when I say it's one of the challenges, this is a, you know, kind of a, it's a nice problem to have. But, like, CRPGs nowadays are just immense. There's a lot of effort that goes into them, and a lot of that effort will show in terms of just the sheer amount of stuff to do. And, or even so, you know, lots of different branches, so that you potentially will have very different experiences of a game. So, for instance, when I played Disco Elysium, I thought the opening was hilarious. I thought there was, you know, very, you know, it was a very, very unique opening experience for me. And I found that very memorable. And then I watched somebody else play it, and they went for none of the, like, fun options at the start. And it was a very, like, it was a completely different game Just one, based on the skill rolls that they had and things like that. But number two, the fact that they like never took the bait for the interesting decisions, just meant like I was running into stuff, like it was running into stuff that I did not even know was an option. Which I think is one of the reasons why people really like a game like that. And why I like games like that. But I also, there are two sort of indirect challenges that I run into, largely based off of my own. Sorry, I'm System Chalk getting soulful. This is going to be more about me, and I realize that maybe this should be more about the game. It took me a very long time to get into the Elder Scrolls series. When I first played Skyrim, I actually didn't like it very much. And that was even worse because so many people talked about how great Skyrim was. And the challenge that I ran into with Skyrim was that I felt that I was on this constant quest treadmill. And particularly it was sort of, hey, the dragons are coming back, the world's going to come to an end. But first, could you deliver my mail? And I'm going to say that I found it overwhelming, but like not in a like I overwhelming has kind of connotations that I don't necessarily mean. It's just, like I said, it sort of feels like I'm being put on a quest treadmill, and that, you know, the list of things that I'm expected to do just keeps growing and growing and growing. And I don't necessarily feel like I have any sort of coherent way of getting through all of it. And it actually took me doing the very first one, the Elder Scrolls Arena, and playing through that all the way up to Oblivion. And interestingly enough, I haven't actually played the remastered version of Oblivion. I think I'd really like it, but it really took me the unique thing about the first game is that you have sales that happen on the holidays for like in the world. You get really good discounts on potentially very strong weapons. And so I would often find that I want to be in town. I don't want to be traveling between towns when one of those like events happens. And so what I'll do is, if, you know, I've got a few days, but, you know, not enough time to make it to another settlement where I'll be able to buy the item, I'm going to want to try and find things that I can do with the time. And that just means going into the, you know, into the tavern and seeing if there is a job that I can do. And that was more or less it. If it was one that I think I wouldn't be able to get done in time, I would turn it down. And if it was, usually it would be one that I think I could get done within the allotted time, and I get a little extra money for it. And if nothing else, I'm covering the cost of staying in the city. And realistically, what I'm doing is I'm sort of building up experience on something that feels like a good use of the time that I have in that region, right? So in that sense, you can almost see that you can see the subtle shift that's happened in terms of presentation for me. Arena is the quest log, right? Any given city that I go into is going to have that quest treadmill. It's, you know, it's always there. The difference is that it's not like I'm opting in. It's not just forcing itself into my quest log. And more importantly, because I'm structuring it around these incremental, like these midway points that I want to hit, such as I want to buy this special sword on a discount, that will make me more powerful, so maybe I can try and go after one of these bigger quests. And also the manual does say that, the expectation is it will take you years in game to get yourself to a point you can do the final battle. That was a format that worked for me. I did find Daggerfall a struggle. I really liked the idea of Daggerfall, and I found the implementation to be a bit more of a struggle. But by the time I got to Morrowind, I sort of had keyed into this idea that Elder Scrolls games are basically like the experience you are signing up for is a world full of possibilities, many of which you are going to walk by and just decide this is not for me. So I don't know, like it took me, I'm sorry, I don't know if this is an interesting story to people or not, but that's a really weird way. Like, I don't know how people who bounce off of Skyrim the way that I did get into the Elder Scrolls games. And maybe they don't, right? But I have to assume that there's at least a couple of converts. But yeah, to me, it really did take sort of seeing that original DNA, realizing that, Morrowind was a continuation of this experience that I actually quite liked. I mean, the other thing too is maybe just simply realizing that many of these quests are actually mutually contradictory, right? Or actually, I think it may be true for Morrowind. I think you can only choose like one of the great houses in the end. Definitely Daggerfall, you can only choose like one of the endings, but I don't think that's quite the same. I'm trying to remember if choosing a faction sort of locks you out of the other ones in Morrowind. Because I think when you get to Skyrim, I think you can actually be like a bit of everything if you really want. And then, yeah, I mean, the other thing too, right, is that I think I realize now that a large part of the Elder Scrolls for people is just completely ignoring the main quest to just go off and do their own thing. And once I understand that, I'm like, okay, yeah, I get it. I don't know if it needed to be communicated to me better or how someone learns that sort of thing, but like, yeah, like I can get into this, right? Like I liked Oblivion. I'm pretty sure when I get to Skyrim, I'm going to enjoy that just as well. So bringing this back to CRPGs, I think one of the things that I reflect on, I believe this game is made in Unity, and I know some of the latest examples of games that are sort of trying to follow, sort of take the mantle of the Interplay, BioWare, Infinity Engine style RPGs. A lot of them use the Unity engine, so I'm thinking of Pillars of Eternity, Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2, Tyranny. Again, I believe this game uses Unity. Also, ones that are maybe trying to go in a different direction, like Disco Elysium. A lot of them use Unity. And of course, Unity is, everybody knows, is this great enabler of independent game development. And I would argue one of the really important factors there is not just that, and this is, you'll hear a similar argument to AI. I'm not necessarily interested in presenting that one. I just want to acknowledge that this may have an echo with connotations that people may not want inside. But I think to me, one of the big keys about Unity is not that the fact that people did not need to develop their own like rendering engine or other game tooling. The answer to this was not just smaller games. That is something that enabled. And there's a number of ways that makes sense. But I think games like Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader, which, by the way, I am not at all meaning to put this on the same footing as a low-budget indie, any more than saying it about Disco Elysium. Like, Disco Elysium had proper investors. Like, I think there's probably a point where they put together sort of a proof of concept where people, wanted to see what they were getting into. But like that all of the drama that happened afterwards is definitely a reflection of the fact that there's ownership stakes, there's money, there's investors, there's this is not just something bootstrapped with sweat equity. So, again, Rogue Trader is this is a game with a budget from a developer that has demonstrated that they are able to, deliver, big experiences. But I will still reiterate, right, that they don't need to put the time and energy into creating the baseline to sort of create the world. I'm sure they're spending effort making their own tools in that. But all of the money and effort is going into making a much larger experience. The only other exception I'll make to this is, the Larian stuff, because of course Larian does develop its own set of tools. Obviously very well funded, very, very large developer. I also say, clearly they made Baldur's Gate 3, but I think it's also fair to say that, they are probably trying to build something a bit beyond. Although I also think maybe Rogue Trader could fairly be categorized as trying to do something beyond that. But all I'm really trying to say on this is that I think it's fair to say that even a game like Baldur's Gate, at least from my memory of it, there's a lot of things to do in it, and I don't know if I would do everything. But I would say the number of things that you can potentially do in a game like this, even before the DLC, is considerably larger. I don't know if you are intended to 100% these things. But where I think the sort of the kind of cleavage between what I sort of think playing a game is and maybe what this game is expecting of me is I don't really know what's important. I have a natural inclination to want to interact with every character. I genuinely don't know at this point with games this large if the expectation is that I'm going to read every interaction with the characters, or if the idea is that no, you're gonna do the ones that you think are interesting, and then from that I would just say, well, how do I know what's interesting? And maybe it's just you look at the description, you say this is something I want to do. But what complicates this is actually the find out what's going on. So, again, the one other, there was another pillar behind this, which is that we live in the age of the game wiki. And, I know I'm a bit of a grump when it comes to wikis. I realize I have a bit of a stubbornness when it comes to them. I like to play the game myself, and part of that is because I feel that I learn a little bit more about games and what makes them work when I see things that the developer communicates to me, right? If I miss something, I kind of want to understand how I missed it. I want to understand, what was I supposed to do to not have that negative outcome? And I'm just trying to think. I think one of the challenges that I run into here Sorry, just got a quick email. But one of the things that I kind of run into, and again, I'm sorry I'm taking so long. I think I'm taking like 20 minutes on this thing. One of the things that throws me for a loop, again, I'm kind of talking about that cleavage with the with the between what the game seems to want from me and what I'm sort of expecting from the game, is for find out what's going on. Let's just read. It says here, the flames of rebellion have engulfed the streets of Rykad Minoris, making traversing them a dangerous endeavor. The Lord Captain must push through the war-torn city to learn what other wicked events are unfolding among the shadows of the burning capital. The rebels captured a Vox station, which they used to eavesdrop on the Planetary Defense Force's communications. Heretics believe in the Final Dawn, a strange event that will soon bring doom to the world. The rebels have performed blasphemous sorcery and blinded one of the heretics with an enormous lens. And blind madmen aimlessly roam among the ruined streets. Now, I'm actually going to take a minute here and see if we can find the wiki. That's no good. For some reason, the connection is very, very slow. But okay, here's what we're going to do. I heard Vextra Life is apparently a somewhat controversial choice. So this page clearly did not load properly, but okay. The objective, find out what is going on, requires finding multiple things. So I haven't actually read this all the way through, but let's see what it says into this. So the objective to find out what is going on requires multiple things. If they interact with any blind person in the upper way, you will find out about them. Then you need to reach the lower levels of the upper way. There are two routes that you can take. The southern area of the map from the rubble, which you can descend. From there, you can either go through the front door, which will put you close to the enemies, or take a detour on the right, which will start the next fight away from the enemies, but it is heavily mined. The northern area of the map has a locked door that you can unlock with tech use. It will put you close to the enemies. Once inside, players will witness a chaos ritual. While observing, there will be a lore warp and an awareness check to gain some additional experience. You will then have the following options. So we did this one, I believe it was... I guess I did this one. During and after the fight, avoid the steam in the room. It will give injury to any character who passes through it. Found that out the hard way. After the fight, gain the following clues to gain the objective. Look at the lens, loot Aurora's sermon from one of the map corners, investigate the Voxcaster in the same corner, and then either hack it with tech use check or use the code from Aurora's sermon, then examine everything. So I believe we did that. Interacting with the safe in the room will bring a puzzle. Next to it is a note with Lore Imperium. Check that it will tell the players how to solve it. Making too many mistakes will reset the puzzle. The solution can be found at the bottom of this page, so we did that. Inside the sewers, player will find a couple of sneaked symbols. Having sufficient lore warp when looking at them will grant a small bonus of experience. Having sufficient lore when investigating it will reveal it as a Herald of Sneech and begin a boss fight. Initially, the rabble on the map will help players, but each time the Herald loses a quarter of its wounds, it will take control of a group of them. After the fight, loot all their knives and scrappy auto pistols. There are also hidden goons above the air conditioning unit and on the lower level. I don't know if we did the hidden goons. When finished, backtrack to the main upper way, exit through the central area to reach the western side. If you have the Lex Imperialis DLC installed, I don't recall if I do, This is where you will encounter the DLC companion Solomorn Anthar, so I'm going to guess I do not have it. He can be effortlessly dispatched using a large group of rebels alongside a squad of Adaptus Arbites. Following this cutscene, you learn through dialogue he is investigating the planetary government. Oh, no, hang on. I do have the Lex Imperialis, then. For some reason, I thought it said I was going to fight him. Oh, be seen effortlessly dispatching. Gotcha. Okay. Following the cutscene, you will learn through dialogue he is investigating the planetary governor for the suspected withholding of the imperial tithe. Unfortunately, he cannot join your retinue at this time, but you will encounter him again later in the governor's bunker. Going down the stairs on the left will take the players to some loot if you can get past 6 traps. Doesn't really say that much about the find out what's going on. We did this. Okay, descend down the stairs on the right, loot one last chest. Here we're in the governor, so speak with the tech. So this is one thing we did. Speak with tech priest Courts Cram to unlock the Explorator's merchant. We did do that, but after the encounter with the governor. Then speak to the governor. Here we go. Players can tell the government that they don't believe he will manage to defeat the insurrection at the current rate. He will ask for proof. You can either tell him all the clues from Find Out What Is Going On objective or use special dialogue options unlocked by having the Astra Militarum option or the Apex of Brilliance Triumph. Successfully convincing him will complete the objective. Inquire about Henriks von Kalorx's location to gain the Gleam of the Final Dawn quest. When the conversation is over, the quest will be completed. So, as far as I can tell here, it doesn't really say what dialogue options to pick. But as far as I can tell, unless there was something about talking with the tech priest ahead of time, we found the information that we needed. And then the problem is that I didn't talk to the governor the right way. And one of the challenges that I've run into in the game is that I don't necessarily know. I mean, sometimes you can tell, like ones that say, okay, we should move on. You kind of know that you're going to leave the dialogue. But when you have options at the very top that take you out of the selection, right? You only get one, or only some of them will take you in deeper into the tree. Those I actually have some difficulty parsing sometimes. And it seems that this was the case where I think, if I can guess properly, that's why we failed that particular quest. How do I put it? Sorry, I'm really trying not to let the day get to me, but I think one of the things here is that, and this is where the tension comes with the game for me, is that because I've now learned that the success of a quest. Hey, Erasmus. I'm trying to remember there's a podcast I was listening to, and it was talking about the relationship between Thomas More and Erasmus. God, which one was it? I think it may have been Conversations with Tyler, actually, which I realize is like a stereotypical podcast bro one. Yes, Joanne Paul on Thomas More and the Tudor World. And I thought she gave... Yes. Obviously the focus here was on Thomas More, but there was a nice little digression on the relationship between the two and sort of some of the what you would expect versus what the actual relationship was. The real shameful thing is that Erasmus is, I would argue probably both Moore and Erasmus, but Erasmus really is, I would say, out of writers who I clearly would like and really should have spent more time with relative to how much I've actually read. Erasmus has probably got the worst ratio of like knowing what I'll like versus actually having read. And I think it's one of these really, it's one of these weird cases because I know I'll like it. It's just sort of like, it'll always be there. It's a little bit like reading Drapier's Letters by Jonathan Swift. Like I've liked everything by Jonathan Swift. So it's sort of like, I can read Drapier's Letters when like I need something that I know will be really good. But like this is the thing, like when do you actually sit down and say, today is the day I'm going to read In Praise of Folly, or today is the day I'm going to read, Drapier's Letters, or, whatever. I've read Gulliver's Travels on stream. I've read Tale of a Tub. Clearly all of the things I have read, there was a clear day where it's like, today is the day I'm going to read this thing. But it's so bizarre that the ones that I know I will like for some reason get a discount on picking it. Because I think I assign a certain value for novelty. I don't know. You find him more compelling as a historical figure than as author. I don't know Latin, and that was his medium. I can't really experience what made him famous in translation. That's fair. I mean, there's actually, this has been coming up. Sorry, guys, this is going to turn into just chatting for a little bit, I think. But this is like a perfect monkey's paw example of like liking classics, but just despising the moment that I'm in. So like, I think a lot of people are saying, whatever you think of it, isn't it amazing that, this great classical work, the Odyssey, is getting like a mega budget, adaptation, and everybody's talking about this story. Like, who could be unhappy with that? And I actually agree, right? Like it's the same reason, actually, I'm really glad you said that, Erasmus, because I generally like Christopher Nolan. I'm not, I don't like the contrarian view, which denies him his skill and his ability to get people in the theater. I also don't like pretending that it's Ingmar Bergman's The Dark Knight, right? The Dark Knight is a very good movie. I do not require it to be a profound expression of, highly sophisticated cinema. Like I do not need The Dark Knight to be Oppenheimer. I think The Dark Knight is doing interesting things. I think the fact that there are many Nietzschean references from the Joker is perfectly intentional in an effort to try and reach a little bit further than what one would expect in terms of a comic movie. But I think it is a comic movie first, and that is all that it needs to be. And it's fine. Like it's completely fine for there to be, like Steven Soderbergh stuff, right? Like he did Schizopolis. He also did Traffic, not necessarily everything he does is like, actually for that, what it's worth, I liked Solaris. I know most people will say, oh, only the Tarkovsky one was good, but yeah, like the thing is that I don't think you need to have one reaction to a Nolan film. And more importantly, I think there are just different movies that he does. I think the common element between them is quality. But yeah, like that's where I'm at. So acknowledging that I put them in different categories. I'd gotten an indication for myself that maybe it wasn't necessarily something I was going to, so when I watched Oppenheimer, I was inconsolable. Like I looked about as haggard as Cillian Murphy at the end of that thing when I went to the bathroom. I thought it was really good. I really thought that it delivered, and it the hype for it was matched. I really like Dunkirk too, actually. But I think I got kind of the impression that some of the things about the Odyssey were going to be simplifying it a bit in a way that made it very good for a movie that's great to watch in theaters, but wouldn't necessarily count among my favorite Christopher Nolan movies. So the expectation was that it would be a good movie, but it wouldn't necessarily be what's sort of implied by the most bankable director, doing, one of the, the great classical works. And then I read a review from The Economist, and I read a review by Henry Oliver, both of whom I kind of respect the taste of. And they both sort of seemed to indicate that it might be on that path. But there are a number of other people I talked to who are very excited about seeing it, and a few, such as yourself, who said that was quite good. And this is the challenge, right? Like, unless you actually go and experience something for yourself, you're not necessarily going to you could just do your best with the written review. So for what it's worth, you may actually, you may have, I was probably going to see it in theaters. I was just going to wait a while to see it in theaters, but you may have actually pushed me a little more to the, towards the watching. Yeah, this is the thing. So I don't feel the need to have ideological agreement with every film that I see, or even like. I think, when I consider the ending, like I know they changed the ending, right? And I think one of the reasons that they changed the ending is that, to quote Emily Wilson, Odysseus is a complicated man. And I know, especially given some of the reactions I think that people may have to like Dune, or just in general to flawed characters, I get the impression that maybe some of those changes were a recognition that maybe the audience isn't ready to deal with, to deal with a character with maybe a few more of those dimensions. And that's fine. Like, the best example I have of that is, I thought the V for Vendetta movie was a good movie, and then when I read the comic, I thought that movie could not have been a worse adaptation of the comic, and that a lot of the things that I thought didn't quite make sense in the movie for me were actually explained in the comic. It's like those ideas were just sitting in the source material waiting to be excavated. So with that in mind, I'm very much of the view that you can do an adaptation that's maybe not to my taste while still making a good movie. But yeah, it's just one of those things, right? When you get some of the indicators in terms of where they're going with it, I make my best judgment in terms of whether or not it fits. But I think you have a lot of thoughts about V for Vendetta, the movie or the comic or both. But yeah, I think what you say, it works for the film that he's trying to create rather than the film some people wish he made. And I think that's a really big one for me, which is that if I'm going to go and watch the Odyssey, I want to go and enjoy I want to go and enjoy the Odyssey. And so if I'm going in expecting a certain thing, that's not necessarily going to mean that I'm open to the experience I get. And the question is this how I want to spend my time? So anyways, I appreciate you speaking up for the Odyssey, because, I feel like it's one that I got to see on the big screen. But I do like that there are someone whose, taste, like I said, I mean, I'm going to make a guess here that there's probably some overlap in terms of our tastes. So I like that there's someone to sort of give the bull case for the Odyssey for me, because the only thing I've really heard from the sides that I listen to is not always hasn't always been flattering. But what I wanted to get to, this was where you were talking about translation, and this is where I got in on it, is that, at least on Twitter, which I realize is not a good indicator of the broader culture, bunch of discussion on translations of Homer. And I mean, I don't want to get too much in culture war stuff, but I also don't want to just pretend that it's not there. Obviously, the big one is treating Emily Wilson's, which I believe is sort of the most recent major translation of the Iliad, or sorry, of the Odyssey, as this, cultural assault. Now, I got to admit, I have not read it except for, yeah, I think that's a very fair point to make, Erasmus. The big thing for me to say on this one is that, except for comparisons that people have made, I haven't read the translation. It's kind of funny. I wasn't that interested in reading the translation just because, like, I just don't have the time to read like a lot of different translations of Homer. So I like classics, but there is also a finite amount of time. So, the thing that did impress me about it, so I was sort of twofold on it, or I guess there's three things. One is, like, there's a couple that were interesting to me, and one where I was sort of like, not the direction I'd go, but like nobody asked me, basically. So the idea of doing it line for line, iambic pentameter, I'm like, wow, that sounds like hard mode. Like, that is actually kind of amazing that they did that. So that was one thing that interested me. The one that didn't interest me was when they said using sort of modern idioms. And it's sort of, this is where my bias comes in. So I kept calling it Fagles, but I think it might be Fagles. Anyways, Robert Fagles, however you pronounce it. I believe this is one of the, I don't want to say standard, because I think the EV Ryu one is also available in Penguin. But like, there's a Penguin edition that you can get of his Iliad and Odyssey, and he also did Aeschylus and Sophocles. I really liked his Sophocles. And the thing that's great about those editions is that they've got these really meaty, introductions by Bernard Knox, this really gifted classicist. I'd argue actually those essays are worth the price of admission already. Now, I want to admit I am not a scholar on this stuff, so I'm going to make a best judgment sort of based on what I know, and I suspect I'm going to say stuff that maybe makes me sound a little pretentious or like obviously misinformed on these. And I just want to be really clear. I want to own this up front. Like, I think it's important to try and be able to, I think it's important to be able to give voice to the idea. But I also just want to say, like, I want to be upfront when I don't know for sure. But the impression that I kind of get is that Fagles is participating in kind of the Alexander Pope style of translation. And what I mean by that is, because it's classical and because it's heroic, it has this very large, and grand style. And I happen to like that kind of writing. Like, I think particularly for something like the Iliad, I think it works well. I also believe the translator's note is quite open about the fact that there's stuff added in, that the effort is to try and, transpose Homer in a certain style, but that it's not going to be sort of this strict adherence to meter, and it's, you know, he's going to give himself some room to work, let's say. And then I'm trying to remember if it was Lattimore or Ryu, but I remember one of them actually does what looks like a prose translate. Like it reads like a novel as opposed to verse. It's just, you know, these are choices that translators make. So what I want to recognize for myself is that there's not just, so I think a lot of translators will be reading other translations and seeing the decisions that their predecessors made. And as a result, there's maybe going to be this accumulation of assumptions about Homer. But on top of that, right, for someone like myself, when I have a favorite translation, that's going to give me an impression that maybe it's the quote unquote original. And I'm trying to remember when it won its award. I think like I think it's the Odyssey got like a 1992, 1996, you know, award for translation. So I don't know, like 30 years, it feels like we have room for another translation of Homer. And you know, this is where I actually think I think Emily Wilson's project is interesting, which is to, you know, be very strict in terms of the lines that she's using, and to try and go back to the poem as written, as opposed to the expectations that have come from, you know, a couple centuries of English translation of Homer. Some by very, very gifted poets, right? Like I wouldn't want to go up against Alexander Pope, frankly. But I also recognize that Alexander Pope is not necessarily going to be, you know, the translation that reflects modern scholarship and maybe even carries with it the meaning that is most direct to me as a modern English reader. So yeah, if the funny thing is, out of the discourse, I would actually say I'm more likely to read Emily Wilson's translation now than I was before, just because I kind of want to see how she did it. And I know I'm going to disagree with some of the choices. I think the one thing I routinely hear from people, and like these are people who give it favorable reviews. In fact, people incidentally who said they didn't like the Odyssey adaptation, but they like Emily Wilson's translation. They say it can be jarring when you see some of the terms used. And the other thing that I found interesting was I did read an interview with her. I think it was the Telegraph. And she said, I think she said that she's actually going back to the Odyssey because the restriction of line for line iambic pentameter was like more than she wanted. Like in doing the project, you know, she set out to do it that way, so finished. But in the end, you know, if she could do it all over again, she would want to loosen the restriction. So apparently she is working on another translation, which gives her a little more freedom. So I don't know. I just sort of think that sort of stuff is interesting. You know, the argument that the archaic language can be an affectation or whatever, but the form is part of the function for you. It's neat when Homer sounds like your inherited idea of classical language. It works. Yeah, I mean, that is you've probably articulated one of the reasons why I like the Fagles translation so much. And I also think too, right, like, you know, if I want to, so I actually have 2 copies of Plotinus's The Enneads, and one of them is a modern scholarly edition, and the other is a edited version of Stephen McKenna's translation. And even the scholarly edition actually says that McKenna reads better, and that the scholarly edition is probably best read in concert with McKenna to parse out the actual meaning of the text, like the written meaning from Plotinus as opposed to McKenna's work. And there's like the Loeb editions, which aren't always going to be the most style. I don't want to be unfair to the Loeb translators, but like I feel those ones are intended to be ones which are really like drilling into as close of a meaning, even if that comes at the expense of style. And again, I feel a little funny saying that, because the version of Quintilian I have, I believe, is actually listed as like the one you get, even though it's Loeb. There's apparently two Loeb Quintilians. It's Douglas. I could probably get it from the shelf, but I've been babbling on too long about this stuff. So anyway, I really was meaning to talk about Erasmus here, but it's hard not to talk about the Odyssey with it just coming out. So, I've been interested enough in translation to have a preferred translator of ancient Greek for myself. I also too, like my preferred Metamorphoses is Charles Martin. It's also the first one that I read, and it's the only one that I've read in its entirety. The single muse of tangent without end. But yeah, like I know enough about translation to sort of be able to express preferences, but also to take the time to look. So apparently Jules Verne, the public domain translations apparently are quite poor. But there are some modern translations which really capture what makes the original French alive. So I know enough and I care enough that I do look into it, but I don't go overboard with it. But bringing it back to the point on Erasmus, maybe because I've been talking so much about it, I just wanted to say this is a response to Erasmus's statement. I find him more compelling as a historical figure than as an author. I don't know Latin, and that was his medium, and I can't really experience what made him famous in translation. And yeah, this is the thing here, is that in the end, the what you take away from it is going to always be, there's always going to be something about. I'll even go so far as to say not just the translation, but also maybe a familiarity with some of the idioms. So, for instance, I've read at least part of Theory of Moral Sentiments, which is the work that Adam Smith did before The Wealth of Nations. I've also found that I've needed to reread parts of the Theory of Moral Sentiments, because as much as I like the old style of writing, it's actually one of my preferred styles. I do find that, particularly because he is talking about philosophy, and specifically ethics, that can be a very abstract topic. And it's very easy for me to sort of get lost in the flow of the language as opposed to the ideas. So, as you say, form is part of the function. Maybe in this case, if I want to know how Adam Smith wrote, well, I can read Adam Smith. He's not that hard. I do struggle a little with Chaucer, but it's the sort of thing I feel like with enough glosses and some time, I can probably manage. Yeah, I think this is one of the things for me, though, is that I do find, certain passages in The Wealth of Nations, certain passages in The Theory of Moral Sentiments. There is something about seeing, the ideas originally presented. And, I'll maybe need the reinforcement of understanding the history and the development of the thought. But where I can, I do still try to engage with the work. And if nothing else, it's just because it provides the, that broader historical knowledge. It gives me a little bit more fuel. And I like it. I like the fact that I'm able to see another facet. But I think probably to maybe put a cap on this, there are more philosophers that I like the ideas from than necessarily like reading the ideas. So I've not read a lot of Quine, for instance, but I was quite fascinated by his reduction of the Library of Babel into binary. And yeah, there's a number of other ideas as well, but like, I'm not entirely sure Quine's going to be the sort of thing that I, take into the bathroom with me and spend some quality time with. If a writer like Nietzsche is a very, very good stylist, and like Kaufman does these really interesting translations. Like, they're just fun to read. And in fact, sometimes, the fact that they're fun to read can be a challenge because, you maybe are not as focused on the ideas. And I mean, like I said, I wanted to put a cap on this, so I'll maybe leave it there. But, there's definitely more people whose ideas... Actually, you know what? Here's the best way for me to say it. Having studied economics and finding a love of the topic, I really... I've benefited immensely from a lot of really deep thinkers on this subject. And there are some of the historical ones who I actually find really interesting. So William Jevons, who's kind of having a moment again because of Jevons' paradox, is just he's just an interesting guy to read. He actually studied under Augustus de Morgan of de Morgan's Laws. But for the most part, I'm not reading Smith. I'm not reading Marshall. I'm not reading Ricardo. Paul Samuelson is an absolute titan. What I'm doing is I am reading distillations of these excellent ideas in the form of a textbook. The same way that we don't read papers by the Bernoullis, we read a calculus textbook. And I think there's call it your 20% time, right? You can sometimes spend your 20% time running around and engaging with some of the original forms, because there's some fun in doing that, and it maybe gives you a new coloring of a favorite subject. But if you spend too much time in the original formulation, then sometimes you're maybe missing the best or clearest statement of the idea, and that's where I mean, in the end, it's where I just kind of come back to the tension of the time that I have. But anyways, for those of you who've stuck through this, I do apologize for the longer rant than intended, but hopefully some of you found that interesting. And to just cover it at the end here, this is one of the challenges that I'm going to be running into in terms of Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader, which is I don't actually know what dialogue option is going to potentially give me an outcome that's different than what I had intended. All right, so we don't get to talk to the rebel. Greetings, your graces. Something resembling a nest made of thermal insulation material. This must be where the workers sleep between shifts.
I still do not see our purpose in coming here.
Huge pipe, the arteries of the ship run through many bays, delivering air, water, heat, and the propulsive force of steam.
Relax,
oh, man.
Old man. Going for a stroll on the lower decks every once in a while is good for you. Lets you see how the simple folk live.
Could I don't know how many Warhammer 40k... Oh, we're going to wind up... Yeah, I was just going to ask this. Okay, cool. There's no spoken dialogue here. Could somebody who knows the Warhammer 40k setting tell me, are the Imperium ships steam powered? That's kind of crazy if true. Because I always thought that there was at least some like, I realize you can get electricity from steam, but you know what I mean, right? Avrilla Vent. The sounds of a heated discussion reverberate through the ship's bays. Lieutenant Avrilla Vent of the ship's enforces is barring the path of her superior, Master-at-Arms Jocasta Sourback, who has arrived clad in armor. Judging by their expressions and tone, the standoff has dragged on for some time already and has now reached a boiling point. Lieutenant Vent, my patience is wearing thin. I have given you an order. Now get out of my way. They have everything in the setting. Maybe it's fusion, maybe it's demon outside pushing the ship real fast. I'd accept either explanation. I mean, the whole idea is that I think Lost Tech is a battle tech concept, but I do imagine that the idea is that the Imperium, at least some of the Imperium's technology is effectively Lost Tech, and that the Adeptus Mechanicus is doing the best that it can, but the ability to create some of the parts may potentially be. I don't actually know what the, like, obviously something on the scale of Warhammer 40k is, you know, manufacturing will be everything from make sure you have enough ammunition for your bolters to, you know, which is already going to be enormous, right? Like, this is, you know, the sheer scale of the, you know, the war machine required for Warhammer 40k is like, just thinking of small arms is already kind of mind-boggling to begin with. But, like, can you actually build a Titan nowadays? Can you build a Dreadnought? Or is the idea that there were just so many of these, you know, monumental warships created that every loss does represent a permanent contraction in the Empire's military capability, but that there's just so many of them that the setting is able to kind of continue on at a meaningful pace? I cannot comply with that order, ma'am. Vent looks shaken, but there is fire in her eyes. This is my deck and my sector. So long as this area remains under the Lord Captain's special oversight, no action can be taken without my express permission. There are only 3 people who are authorized to make me stand down. The first officer, the rogue trader, and the Emperor himself. So not all my lessons fall on deaf ears, Abelard mutters in crabby approval. He does not clarify whether he means Vent, Sourback looming over her, or both. Your lordship! Noticing you, 2 officers snap to attention and salute, their subordinates following suit a moment later. What's the situation? Your lordship, my people have locked down the bay where the strikers are, including their leaders. We have the situation under control as far as resources allow. Under control, Lieutenant. I came here to lead an investigative unit, and what do I see? The rabble is on the verge of mutiny. There is nothing to investigate. This simply calls for immediate repressions and firing squads, and you, Vent, are a step away from facing charges yourself. We encountered some locals on our way. I am going to reload, by the way, if this takes us... my hope here is I want to speak to the strikers. So I think this is going to close the dialogue for sure. I feel like this is equivalent to what's the situation. But given that I spent so much time talking about this, I do actually want to sort of just communicate what I'm reading from the game as opposed to what the reality is. We encountered some locals on our way here. Their conduct was outrageous. They even tried to throw things at us. Vent's gaze is full of worry and regret. The people are getting desperate, clearly. They saw the assault unit and decided they had nothing left to lose. I mean, I apologize, Lord Captain. It is outrageous. I'm sure the people simply didn't recognize you. It wouldn't have occurred otherwise. We will deal with them once the current situation is resolved. I want to speak with the strikers. Abelard's mouth twists, but he restrains himself and says nothing. Right you are, Lord Captain. Allow me to wish you good luck. Hope gleams in Lieutenant Vent's eyes. So before I go too much further, I do want to explore the map. Oh, that's interesting. I also just play holding tab down because, I don't know, like I don't really want to miss a chance to get something.
This ocular implant was a worthwhile investment.
A container can be seen beyond the massive bars. Perhaps examining the pipe will allow you to reach it. Isn't that what I'm doing? I may,
It's about time.
This might be something I do just a quick search for, because I have a feeling that this is going to come up more than once. But before I do that, I'd love to see how they live on the upper decks, even just once.
None shall stand in my way.
Okay, sorry for another bit of silence here, but still trying to find my feet. Okay, so I am, for those of you who are mad at the clankers, I have to admit the AI overview at the top of the screen says, to reach the container, you must first resolve the deck worker strike first. So that's that. I'm not going to look any further. I will say this is actually one really helpful thing. It's like, okay, now I know why I can't interact with it. I will say, oh, that's interesting. So it says frenzy. I actually thought,
Follow my lead.
I thought the frenzy indicator meant I could talk to someone. Emperor, save us and keep us. This is depressing. I was born in this sector, and it looks like I'll die here too. Inside the box, a string of scratched letters runs along the edge. Different first names, but the same surname. It looks like this box has been passed down in the family from generation to generation.
I'll lay claim to the stars. Victory awaits.
Greetings, your graces. Wow, nobles from the upper decks down here to see us. A dozen pairs of eyes stare apprehensively at you. The people before you are typical inhabitants of the lower decks. You take in their simple clothing, crude weapons, and faces that display varying levels of mutation, from the barely discernible to the strange to the outright grotesque. Rivet. A whisper passes through the crowd, and you detect a mixture of fear, astonishment, and joy in their reactions. Finally, 3 people break away from the crowd, an elderly woman and 2 men. These must be the leaders. They bow clumsily before you. Lord Captain, you've come down to us. We were attacked on the way here. How do you explain that? Here's an explanation for you. The people have been pushed to their limit, and now they're lashing out. As if we don't know why these top deck units are being sent down here. Like that one there, the lieutenant won't let pass. Our clans are all inside the bay that's been sealed off, but the lower decks are big. I'm sure there are some people who've had just about enough. We're getting it from all sides. The soldiers have encircled the ones who've risen up. A death squad has just arrived. It's no wonder folks are lashing out. Their words seem sincere to you. Their body language and glances traded between them reveal that the news of the attack has shocked them. Tell me what is troubling you. Why are you striking? Striking? That's news to us, your lordship, says a tall, thin man in worker's garb. All we're doing is asking questions, saying what we think. Shut up, Rivet, snaps the old woman, who turns her hostile dark eyes on you. Here's the deal, your lordship. Your damned enforcers are all over us down here. They say they're looking for cultists. One wrong word and they're reaching for their batons. If they want to punish someone, they turn off the heating to the whole base for a week at a time, so we get sick and freeze. In my clan, 2 little ones died from inflammation in their lungs, all because of those enforcers. The old woman spits on the floor and rubs at the spittle with the toe of her worn-out shoe. So I like this. I know, so this is the challenge that I run into whenever I talk too much, is that we were talking in the previous episode about the idea of, in the world of Warhammer 40k, clearly chaos cults are a thing, and they are a major concern. However, you can also see how the structure of the Imperium creates an environment in which that kind of heresy is ripe to be bred. I think that's also perfectly intentional on the part of the setting. But like the idea that any uprising can be explained away by chaos, and specifically that the harsh enforcement can lead to a situation in which people, who otherwise wouldn't, maybe, go for the terrible deal. And I think I bracketed it a little bit with one. I really wish I remembered what subreddit this was, but someone who said, isn't working on a factory world like is basically there should, if because working on a factory world is so unpleasant, shouldn't you be indifferent as to whether or not you get caught by the Drukhari, as if working a 16-hour day, which, having done that is unpleasant. I'm not trying to say I want us to be in a world where that happens. I really like the fact that we've largely divided the day into 3 parts, 8 for sleep, 8 for work, 8 for leisure. But let's be honest here. I won't make this as long of a digression as last time, but I was going to say, I actually had to do a very brief presentation on sweatshops in an introductory economics class. And it was not the key. One of the things that was interesting about it was I got pretty good marks on it because I was sure, what I did was I was sure to make sure that I did an economic analysis of it. While also I also wanted to make sure that I wasn't just like towing some sort of libertarian party line. So what I wanted to say is that, from what we have studied in the context of, in the context of, basically the line that I'd sort of made on it was like, when we study in the context of this this subject, here's where the reasoning would take us, right? And then the bit of the dilemma, which is you'd never want to put in a false dichotomy, but you're saying is like, you can have hard work or no investment and no work. And the question is whether or not people are, going to volunteer, like, are ultimately are what are the participants looking for in this? And again, that one's already a problem, right? Because very often we find that there are more than just the two options in front of you, but it's like a 10-minute presentation in front of a class. So I tried to give it in terms of the stylized model, and I said, it was like, well, why would people object to such a rational thing when we look at it here? And then essentially what I did was, I'd already read A Modest Proposal in middle school, so I actually did a spin on it and sort of said, this is ultimately the very same kind of argument that provides the engine for a satire like A Modest Proposal, where you do not just want an abstracted model to replace the other dimensions of the problem that people might be concerned about. And I sort of left it at that the role that an expert can take is to explain the consequences of certain choices. But in the end, the limit for the expert is they cannot tell people what their values are going to be. This actually came up with COVID for me as well, where I sort of said that when you hear a lot of health policy analysts, they're generally not doing a terrible job in terms of talking about consequence. Or like if you talk to an economist, here's what happens if you shut everything down for this period of time or whatever. And where I feel that the mistakes were happening in a lot of COVID dialogue was that people were moving beyond their specialty, where they do have some expertise and they're making a sound judgment in terms of what the consequence of a given policy will be. But then they're immediately translating it into their particular set of values. And I think this is where a lot of very unproductive arguments happened in COVID, which is I think that experts should not be denied the ability to voice their values. But I do think that they need to make sure that they differentiate between what is a value for them on which there could be reasonable disagreement, right? Moving it away from this is no less contentious, but some people think there should be higher taxes. Some people think there should be lower taxes. And usually it's not because people like high taxes, but it's because of the idea in terms of the state providing more of certain goods and services. And I think an economist can give you some studies in terms of what the consequences for that has been. Clearly, zero taxes is not a feasible policy, nor is 100 taxes. Sorry to, go Laffer curve on you, but I think it is fair to say that, barring perfect knowledge, we're probably not going to find, the actual optimal taxation in a mathematical sense. What we are going to do is we're going to collectively elect representatives who implement a tax code roughly in line with what our preferences are. And again, you can say if you raise taxes, this will be what happens. If you lower taxes, this will be what happens. But you can't necessarily tell people, we need to cut more healthcare so that we can lower taxes, or cut schools, or cut military. And you can't necessarily say, like people can value that. What you can tell them is the consequences as an expert. But being an expert informs you as to those consequences. It doesn't necessarily it doesn't give you the right to tell people, you can't want that. And it's as simple as, I think most people consider an ideal to be that where we should all eat healthy. But I think most people would find it considerable overreach if doctors could like go to you in the candy aisle and say you can't buy that coffee crisp because it has no nutritional value for you, right? Like we are an affluent society where we enjoy a certain amount of degradation for our fleshy forms in order to achieve some small pleasure. And, you know, it's at that point, you know, we're just kind of arguing over a matter of degree. Taxes are like big topics that, you know, people get really passionate about. But, you know, I would say the overreach of experts can sometimes feel a little bit like somebody telling you can't have a barbecue because, you know, red meat's bad for you. But in any case, bringing it back to Warhammer 40K, yeah, it's a tricky one here. Like the reason why I wanted to set this up is that some of my own personal preferences are creeping into Konstantinos here to say that I'm just coming from the rebellion on the planet. It is almost certain that this little side quest is intended to be a like a mirror to the rebellion. I've seen what incompetence, or I've seen how, you know, legitimate grievance can feed the forces of chaos. And you can have, I've sort of played the character as sort of I haven't done a heretical choice. I have split between, I've kind of wavered between iconoclast and dogmatic. And I kind of see here the idea being that chaos is absolutely a challenge, a serious one. It is the most serious thing that the Imperium is facing. We have to deal with it, and dealing with it is not necessarily the nicest way of handling it. However, having seen how the overreach can only accelerate the problem, and particularly at a point where you know, we're already looking to replenish the crew, as much as possible, I do not want to make the same mistakes that we saw in the other region. Argenta does not interrupt the workers, but you see the sadness well in her eyes when the children's deaths are mentioned. She quietly whispers a requiem prayer and makes a sign over herself. It's all true. Vent is the only Enforcer officer who stood up for us. It's clear as day who had a mother from the lower decks and who grew up amidships and has no fellow feeling towards us. The grim man with the scarred face throws up his arms. Your lordship, we're no villains here. We're honest workers, your servants. We've plotted no disorder, we went on strike openly, and now we've got guns pointed at us. All we're doing is asking to be allowed to work in peace without being harassed. The persecution started apropos of nothing, you say. I was told that one of you was found in possession of a cultist amulet and that there are heretics hiding here. A cultist amulet? What's that? The G-Jaw they found on the dead drunkard? If it was something evil or forbidden, we sure didn't know. The enforcers just said that they were looking for heretics among us, and anyone obstructing their investigation would be punished. But how could there be heretics here? We know our own people. There have been no new faces around. Definitely not, and if there were, we'd be the first to report them. And as for this amulet, or whatever it is, they took it off a dead body. There are no cultists still breathing in our sector, that's for sure. When that fight broke out, some enterprising folks looted the bodies. The boots they came back with. Nobody's ever tread these decks in boots so fine. I can tell you that. It seems to me these cultists have better commanders than us. Old Nan's getting close to heresy. Oh yeah, those boots are really fine, and there's no harm in taking them, right? As for the amulet, it must have been pocketed by someone who didn't know any better. We don't need any amulets around here. We all worship the Emperor, and when we're working, we bow down before the machine spirits of the large and small transformers and the servo motor, the same way my grandfather was taught 100 years ago by a tech priest who came calling. Believe us, your lordship. We are people of faith. I confirm the information regarding the proper tending of the machine spirits in this sector. Servitors indicate that these commoners are performing the sacraments they are permitted to know. Naive children. Weren't you taught from an early age that the danger of the archenemy's creations? Weren't you warned that any unfamiliar object could be one of them? We were told, Holy Sister, but it was long ago. The last time we saw a confessor in our sector, it was just after I'd lost my third little one. That is regrettable, but you cannot lay the burden of leading a righteous life on the shoulders of the Holy Fathers. Who will you blame when beasts crawl out of those amulets you stole from the heretics? The Holy Father who is not there, or the scavenger who brought the evil down on himself and his neighbors? Abelard, do you have anything to add? I was authorized to use all necessary measures to locate Chaos worshippers hiding in this sector. The specific steps taken by the officers were not reported to me. Abelard frowns, clearly disgruntled at having to explain himself in the workers' presence. Nevertheless, I am certain their actions were justified. Cultists are no drunken stevedores, and they are an enemy and a threat to the ship. Neutralizing them demands decisive action. Sarabak, was it really necessary to torture these people with cold? The rabble understands one language, Lord Captain, that of violence. As per regulations, should the laborers persist in their unwillingness to cooperate, the next step is limiting air supply and cutting off water, which is almost certain to restore order. The peasants can grumble all they want, but in the end they are the source of their own misery. All they have to do is bow their heads and fall in line, and the need for punitive measures will disappear. What changes do you want? Would you look at this? The exalted Lord Captain himself is asking us build rats what we want. Well, here's what. We want you to rein in your damned enforcers, to quit turning off the heat, and to stop battering everything that moves. No, that's not it. We want the enforcers gone from here, and we want to be armed. Give us arms, and we'll govern ourselves. We'll defend ourselves if these cultists do show their faces. I've been leader of my clan for 20 years now. Getting rid of these club-wielding thugs can only improve things around here. You've gone too far, old man. They'll never let the maggots on the lower decks live without the enforcers breathing down their necks. They probably even insist on enforcers on the upper decks, too. As for weapons, what do we need them for? Before the first day's out, we'll have someone shooting their neighbor out of stupidity or drunkenness. We don't need that. If the enforcers stop hassling us, that'll be enough. In return, we'll find the scavengers who robbed the cultists' bodies, and we'll talk to them, one lower decker to another. If there's any more of those damned amulets about, we'll hand them over to the enforcers ourselves. You speak for yourself and your clan, and I'll speak for me and mine. We don't want empty gestures. I want real change. They'll promise us the world now, but as soon as the Anointed One turns his back, these brutes will be on us even harder than before, all because we dared to speak out. The tall worker's eyes dart between the two arguing leaders. Every few seconds he opens his mouth as if planning to agree, but each time he falls silent, making simply a few vague noises of approval. I'm most inclined towards coercion here, but I'm going to do Thoughts Abelard, Master at Arms, where do you stand? Our options here. You have failed to convince me of your trustworthiness. If this unrest ends now, everyone who is involved will be eliminated. That's too harsh. Fine, I'll give the order for the enforcers to be withdrawn from this sector, and you'll be given weapons. Let's see how you cope governing yourselves and what a difference it makes. I don't want to do that. Spreading anarchy on the ship is the first step towards embracing chaos. Putting weapons into untrained hands would be even worse. What's more, the enforcers are needed to maintain oversight and order. Withdraw those demands, and we'll consider the rest. So I think that's what I want to go for. So, thoughts, Abelard? The story about going scavenging for boots and accidentally picking up a heretical amulet doesn't convince me. These people were moments away from rebelling and possibly becoming minions of the archenemy. We must not give them what they want. Even if they did acquire something innocently, purely out of their own stupidity, that does not mean they are not tainted with corruption. What begins as petty thievery can turn into a far graver problem. I have seen it before. Abelard's face darkens momentarily. In my second war, there was a sergeant in the Imperial Guard regiment that was stationed nearby. The sergeant took an ordinary pocket knife from the body of a heretic, and his whole unit lost their lives for it. When they finally managed to break into the barracks, they found not a single survivor, only the pocket knife, which had grown through all the rows of beds like a metal choking vine. So when it comes to scavengers, malcontents, strikers, or whatever they'll turn into next, my verdict is simple: give them no quarter. Astra Militarum, the primary combat force and first line of defense of the Imperium, also known as the Imperial Guard. This military body is tithed continuously from all across the Imperium, recruiting fighting men and women to overwhelm the enemies of humanity with firepower and their endless numbers. Master-at-Arms, where do you stand? Give the rabble a grox and they'll take the Agri world, Lord Captain. They only understand brute force and will interpret any concession as a sign of weakness. Giving them weapons and recalling the enforcers would be folly. It would only be a matter of time before we had a full-scale mutiny on our hands. It sounds like we're already there. Yeah, so I mean, honestly, I think coercion's the only option here. Spreading anarchy on the ship is the first step towards embracing chaos. Putting weapons into untrained hands would be even worse. What's more, the enforcers are needed to maintain oversight and order. Withdraw those demands, and we will consider the rest. The tall worker they call Rivet shrugs and casts a sidelong look at the old woman. Old Nan, listen. The Lord Captain himself has come down to us and is offering concessions, and I don't know of a single person in the whole of Depot 4 who's ever stood next to the rogue traitor, let alone talked to them. Back down. It's no time for you to be a stubborn old crone. Listen to us, Old Nan. The 3 clans of Depot 4 ought to act as one. We've made our minds up. It's your turn to decide. Don't ask them to disband the enforcers or give us weapons. We don't need any of that. The old woman hisses in dissatisfaction. You two are ganging up on me, is that it? So brave you are against an old woman, but I'll shut up. I will, indeed. I won't go against the 2 clan leaders on my own. If you want to make peace with the enforcers, make your peace. That's great. Just fantastic. Lord Captain, we're all agreed. Then it's decided. The persecution will stop, and I will expect you to assist in locating any remaining amulets or weapons left by the cultists. Your lordship, thank you. You've not abandoned us lower deckers. You came yourself and settled everything. I'll tell my grandchildren about this. I'm curious, I'm assuming the fuel and provisions just comes from the fact that we do actually need to provide for these people now. It'd be nice if there was a little bit of an explanation there, but... Of course, your lordship. We'll root out any nasty business faster than the enforcers, and we'll leave no stone unturned. See, this is, to me, policing against chaos within the community makes the most sense, and that you subdivide it in such a way that no single community can overrun the enforcers. Sort of defense in depth. They showed mercy on us. I can't believe it. Okay, so before I go too much further, I want to go back to this thing that told me. Okay, apparently it's not resolved, or the advice was wrong.
I won't tolerate weakness. We should deal with this.
Now we loot the lower deckers. This page is where the start of each shift is marked. The last mark is missing. The workers went on strike. The gauge shows that the steam pressure in this pipe is close to the maximum. However, it does not reach the bars at the other end. I don't quite know what it means by that.
None shall stand in my way.
Nothing is happening, perhaps turning a different valve will work. Oh, joy. The heatsink warms the air around it to a scorching temperature. This is the warmest part of the bay. The workers have even dragged deck chairs here. I think this is going to be a repeat of the find a completely random set of otherwise undifferentiated objects and make sense of the order. Nothing is happening. Perhaps turning a different valve will work. This is definitely the sort of thing that I want to just like find a guide for. Like this may be I'm sort of unfamiliar with Owlcat games.
It's about time.
But I'm not, yeah, like I really don't quite know what the appeal is of so many individual items that you need to interact with no consequence.
A new challenge for me?
Okay, we've already lost a lot of time to me chatting, so I think what I'm going to do, I'll use my tablet for this just so you can enjoy the soundtrack. Also, I maybe should just share here, I feel like I've kind of screwed up the stream today talking so much. I mean, part of it is kind of processing a bad work environment. Anybody who's just kind of here watching, like I know some people like the conversation, some people want to see more of the game. And just because I'm hitting this moment here, I'm sorry to ask it so plainly, but am I just screwing up this game? Like, is this getting kind of boring to watch because I'm like having extended dialogue and then like running into puzzles which are just sort of like not really made for me? Okay, so it says the valves you need to press have steam coming out of their pipes.
Victory awaits.
Don't think it says... Like, I don't know how I reset this thing, but... So, I do notice the different sound. But I think the part where I got lost here is that I couldn't translate the... Oh, you know what? I know how. So this is one of the reasons why I'm always reluctant to look stuff up, but I do give myself the option.
I'll lay claim to the stars.
I'm pretty sure the it had no effect played over something like this, and it resulted in me translating nothing happened for one of the sounds that was like a proper indicator.
None shall stand in my way.
This is a hard one because it's not clear to me that there's steam coming out of it. Oh, I think I get it now. Ah, okay. So you're seeing the steam. Yeah, I get it now. So what it's trying to communicate is, the steam is moving through these pipes, and you're picking up. I will concede that one definitely made an effort to communicate to me. I definitely think so. I don't think the persistence of the message is the sin. I think even if it had even if I didn't run into that, I probably would have needed to look it up. But I do sort of acknowledge. Oh. I don't know. No bulls from the upper decks down here to see us. This is one where I don't want to lay it entirely at the feet of the developer. There was definitely an effort, and I feel that it didn't necessarily land, but I feel that I have a part to play in the difficulty. Stopping unexpectedly, Abelard imperiously dismisses the unit to stand at a distance and addresses your other companion, saying, "I have an urgent matter to discuss with the Lord Captain. Please give us a moment." Abelard looks at you, and his last vestiges of restraint vanish. "Well, are you pleased with your investigation, Lord Captain?" You kowtowed to the disloyal rabble. You believed their lies and showed them leniency. Next time the ship is attacked by cultists, that rabble will welcome them in with open arms and allow them to wreak whatever havoc they like, because they see you as a weak leader. Is that how you see your future at the helm of the von Valancius Protectorate? Let us talk about your role in all this instead. You allowed this revolt to happen. Your actions practically guaranteed it would. I would say I handled the situation myself had you not decided to intervene, Abelard says irascibly. Remember Lord Captain Theodora. Do you think she ever set one slippered foot on the lower decks? No, she did not. Such matters were left to myself and the junior officers while she dedicated herself to the grand designs for the Protectorate, as any true strategist and rogue traitor ought. I would be only too willing to trust in my seneschal and not fill my head with such matters, but the situation had spiraled out of your control, Abelard. Abelard's face relaxes slightly. You're right, at least as concerns junior officers making complaints directly to you. And Abelard stands straight at attention. I lost my temper, Lord Captain, and I believe I ought to explain myself. Abelard speaks slowly, the words not coming easily to him. The prosperity of the von Valancius Protectorate is not just an empty phrase to me. I left the Imperial Navy for a chance to see it flourish. It was the most momentous decision of my life. I did it because I saw in Lord Captain Theodora's deeds the sign of true greatness. Rogue traders do not simply forge new routes and capture worlds. They create order out of anarchy. That creative impulse was entirely lacking during my time in the military. So I left behind everything I had known, everything my family had known. I come from a long line of officers, and I embarked upon this incredibly reckless venture. Lord Captain Theodora entrusted me with all the concerns she had no time for. She would go off her flagship for long periods to distant frontiers, on scouting voyages, and the advancement of the entire Protectorate rested on my shoulders. And then suddenly, everything that had been built over years and years began to quake, rattling like a flimsy hangar on a seismically active world. One of the senior officers betrayed us. The rogue trader was killed, and who knows what is happening on the planets. I tell you this honestly, without fear of appearing weak. All this has come as a grievous blow to me. I am not panicking or grieving, because I cannot allow myself to panic or grieve. I am duty-bound to aid the new rogue trader, to aid you, to find your footing as quickly as possible. And to do that, I must insulate you from problems that in the past have been dealt with by tried and tested procedures set in the ship's regulations. Procedures that were established long ago and have functioned smoothly for decades cannot suddenly be deemed excess to requirements. There's some interesting options here. So Theodora trusted in established procedures, and she died. I won't make that same mistake. If you want to keep building the future of the Von Valancius Protectorate with me, stop living in the past. I understand, but you need to learn to respect me as your Lord Captain and Rogue Trader, accept it, and start living in a new world, a world where Theodora is gone, and where you and I have new decisions to make. The prosperity of the Von Valancius Protectorate is just as important to me. You are the only person who has comprehensive knowledge of how things run on this ship. I think in the future I will follow your recommendations. I value what Theodora created, and I trust this situation is an aberration in the ship's otherwise smooth operation. Since the established procedures are working, I see no reason to change them. I've seen plenty of sentiment and hand-wringing in recent days, but very little competence. I have no plans to rely on your judgments and your tried and tested procedures in future. No. I think this one is the most about building a new future, so I understand, but you need to learn how to respect me as your Lord Captain and Rogue Trader. Accept it and start living in the new world, a world where Theodora is gone, and where you and I have new decisions to make. Abelard solemnly inclines his head. Yes, Lord Captain. After a moment's silence, he adds, looking at you with interest. Your resolve is admirable and demonstrates strong leadership. I shall remember this moment, should my old habits ever begin to creep back in. And now, please, let us leave the lower decks. If the rogue trader desires to stretch his legs, there are far more suitable places.
A new challenge for me?
Alright, so I thought that was a nice little companion to the rebellion on the world. So I do want to do more things in the Cronus Expanse. However, I didn't go to a couple of floors in the ship. Also, Pascal's a member of the party, so I may want to do some dialogue with him. I'll start with Argenta, because she's my favorite.
Greetings.
Even in stillness, Sister Argenta radiates energies. With her dark eyes shining and a slight blush to her cheeks, she is reciting a prayer and looks at you only once she has spoken the final line. Konstantinos, greetings. Thank you for this conversation. Until next time. It's always hard to tell when there's new dialogue options. So... Pascal, shrouded in his crimson robe, greets you with a soft voice synthesized by the Vox system. The mechadendrites growing out of the tech priest's back swivel in your direction, as if examining you with curiosity. Do you know anything about malfunctioning servitors on the ship?
Information about the incidents has been detected in the catalog. The incidents have been acknowledged as insignificant. A technical inquiry has established that the most statistically likely cause of the errors was a transgression of sacrilegious negligence during the lobotomizing rite. This disgraceful act of malfeasance has allowed shadows of the servitor's thoughts and recollections to survive in the depths of his mind, which ought to be dedicated to service alone. As a ship's engine seer, I accept the results of the technical inquiry. As a learned servant of the Omnissiah, I question its findings. The patterns of the malfunctions form a more complex picture than can be discerned by those of lower ranks. For this reason, instructions have been issued across the ship to report any new incidents to me personally.
I have some questions about your visit to Rykad Minoris.
The request is approved. I am ready to provide the necessary information.
What brought you to Rykad Minoris?
I came heeding the call of my mentor, the blessed Archmagus Amanat. We were supposed to meet on Rykad Minoris and discuss my mission.
The people who wanted to kill you at the port weren't renegades. It was just a cover.
Thank you. Information acknowledged. I will analyze it and take additional security measures.
I obviously lost a dialogue option there, and I wish I knew what it was previously.
I came heeding the call
What do you
of
think?
my mentor, the blessed Archmagus Amanat.
It's hard to talk over this, so.
We were supposed to meet on Rykad Minoris and discuss my mission.
What do you think of this Abel Hanuman? Let me just see if I can get this correct. Hanayuman? I think it's Hanayuman. Okay.
I propose that it was the blessed Amonat who assumed this name. This name is assigned to me. His presence in the hands of heretics is categorically unacceptable. The canon of technological security commands that every effort be made to rescue a high-ranking bearer of knowledge.
That will be all for now.
Acknowledged.
I want to know more about your past.
The request is approved. I have no outright restrictions on disclosing this information.
Where are you from?
Information about my origins is worthless. I belong to the priesthood of explorators and came to the Coronis Expanse over 200 years ago. Any events preceding that moment are insignificant.
How did you end up in the Coronis Expanse?
I was honored to become a member of the Explorator Cognizance Fleet. When the Adeptus Mechanicus summoned the faithful for an exploratory venture into the depths of the Coronis Expanse, I joined the fleet in fulfillment of my sacred vows of comprehension.
Explorators, Adeptus Mechanicus tech priests who conduct a never-ending search for unrecorded phenomena, forgotten archaeotech hordes, and unknown life forms. Combining the roles of adventurer, warrior, and emissary of the machine cult, explorators possess enviable power and immense resources. They traverse the galaxy on their explorator fleets, commanding countless serfs, servitors, and adepts. And I'm not going to lie, this definitely sounds like something that would be very interesting to have as a main character in a game. Why are you not with the fleet then?
Archmagus Amanat, my blessed mentor, commanded me to crew the orbital station Altar Templum Calixus X-17. This venerable temple station was founded in the early years of our expansion into the Coronis Expanse. It is currently a rear observation post of the Cognizance Fleet in orbit around the star Furibundus.
Who are the Explorators?
The sacred fraternity of explorers. The cult Mechanica sends us out to the frontiers of the known sectors as researchers and conquerors. We are the warriors of the code, who return to the lost worlds and devote themselves to recovering the lost ancient knowledge. Explorators are granted the privilege of being more independent than many of our tech comrades. However, it has earned us a reputation as unstable and poorly controlled troublemakers whose unorthodox views are dangerously close to apostasy.
Tell me about your mechadendrites.
They are my younger brothers and guides on the way to the Omnissiah. Their machine spirits are directly bound to my neocortex and pick up impulses from my subconscious. Sometimes they act ahead of my thoughts. This is how the Omnissiah leads me to comprehension.
We can stop there.
Acknowledged.
Tell me more about the Adeptus Mechanicus.
I am honored to belong to the priesthood of Mars, guided by its tenets. We safeguard technology against the impure and the unenlightened.
I will confess, I do find the Cult of Mars really, sorry, Priesthood of Mars. I should probably acknowledge who I'm talking to. This is one of the one. I don't think it was Mechanicus that made me aware of it. Clearly, it has a very memorable teaser / opening cinematic, which has been memed to, from the moment I first realized it was something about the limitations of my flesh. It disgusted me. I also thought they did a really nice inversion of it for Mechanicus, the Mechanicus 2 announcement trailer. But if I recall correctly, I think I first became aware of Adeptus Mechanicus in Warhammer 40k Gladius, which was the game Proxy Studios did before Zephon. And just like, you don't learn that much about the faction on its own, but like just kind of looking at some of the art for it and the overall style, I was sort of like, this looks really interesting. And then I found out there was like a turn-based tactical game built around them. I seem to recall playing that on EA Play first, because they used to have a bunch of really good third-party titles, and then I think they're like Epic had a like a free game of it. But anyways, yeah, it's I've just generally found this to be a really interesting faction. It's one of the few where I have I've like gone out of my way to sort of read some of the like the Warhammer. I'll say it again. Like I actually really love passionate fandoms, and it's really cool when people nerd out about stuff. But like the Warhammer 40k wiki, I swear, is made by crazy people. Just like any give. Actually, the best thing I can do here is sorry to distract. I won't make this too long, but just so I can illustrate what I'm talking about here. All right, so here we go. Fandom. Obviously, I've got an ad blocker, otherwise this thing would be unmanageable. So, here you go. We've got Warhammer 40k, 7,289 articles since the refounding in May 2010. And I think the best one I can go for is the Horus Heresy. So let's just... oh dear. Yeah, here we go. Okay. So, like, obviously, if I was going to read this on stream, which I will not, and you will see why in a little bit, I would do kind of zoom in a little bit like this so that, we can see the text. But at 100, right, on this small font that I think some people are going to feel are going to feel as maybe smaller than they can reasonably do. I'm going to just run this at a constant speed, right? So that's the table of contents. We just kind of keep going. The Council of War, Great Crusade. So this obviously predates the heresy itself. All right. So I don't think we're even a quarter of the way. This is probably like a fifth, and we're now corruption of the Space Marine legions. I was particularly interested in the fight between Horus and the Emperor. Because I remember like reading it and I was like, oh, this is kind of wild. It reads very like space opera-y. It says into the Eye of Terror, so I think I probably went No, maybe not. Okay, so this is where I went up for a little bit. Route to Terra. All right, here we go. Siege of Terra. Here we go. So if you want to actually get the big, like, decisive battle between the between Horus and the Emperor, like, you could argue the, you know, this is where you start. This is like a preposterous amount already. Then you scroll down even further. Here you have, like, the actual fight. Right, when the Emperor finally entered the throne room of the vengeful spirit, he saw the winged corpse of the angelic Sanguinus lying at Horus's feet. So even here, right, like, this is a full page describing the final battle. And then you still have, like, another fifth to read in terms of the entry. So just as a curiosity for myself, I'm going to ignore the timeline, the point form, but I'm just going to limit myself to the prose. I wonder if I can do, yeah. For a complete chronology of the events, please see the chronology, as if the it's going to include the table of contents, but let's do this. I'm just going to remove the display capture for a second in case I have. Yeah. Sorry, it's just an essay I'm working on that's in a really early draft. Holy smokes. Okay, so sorry for those of you that like so first of all, let's say 2.5 pages for contents. I think I'm just going to have to accept footnote. Well, assuming that those are footnotes, but what I can do here. Okay, so the Horus Heresy article removing the so 90 pages is one thing, but, like, we've got lots of white space on here, so I feel that that's maybe gaming the measure a bit. But this is 44,333 words. Yeah, we just need to make all of our, actually, it occurred to me that technically, if you think of books, like, we most of the books that we read are widescreen. There should be a way of getting a flesh concave. But yeah, actually, let me just search for one other thing here. Because this number sounds suspiciously familiar. Cultist Simulator launched with approximately 60,000 words of text. The developer Weather Factory initially aimed for a maximum of 70,000 words, roughly 25% the size of Sunless Sea. Book of Hours was released with significantly more content, approaching approximately 170,000 to 180,000 words. So just for reference, right, the single entry. Now, admittedly, the Horus Heresy is, like, a big thing in the Warhammer 40k setting, but, like, the wiki page for Horus Heresy, if you limit it to just the prose, and this article contains excessive amounts of detail tagged to the wiki page, that would be hilarious. But yeah, like, this thing is, like, 2/3 of the entirety of Cultist Simulator, describing admittedly an important event in the chronology of Warhammer 40k, but, like, perhaps maybe a bit more than what we could reasonably expect a God, I wish I could remember there is actually going to be one more thing I look for just because I know it should be a feature in this version of Word. But I was using Office 365 for a while, so I don't remember, or maybe it's Microsoft 365 now. Anyway, whatever they call the modern version, there are some changes because I'm like one numbered version behind. Actually, is it file info? No. All right. One more quick set. More than what a dilettante would read? Oh, yes. I am unashamedly a Warhammer 40k dilettante. Sorry, I got to find the version of Word that I'm on. I don't want to spend too much more time on this, but this is just going to be a little bit of fun we can have with Microsoft Word. Okay. When correcting spelling and grammar. Check the box to show readability statistics. That's already enabled. Ah, I get it. I have to do the spelling and grammar first. Also, I'm now saying, I guess I can bring this up here. So it's also finding repeated words. Lorga also called the legions first. So that's fine. I make that mistake all the time. I'm hoping this only applies to this document. Otherwise, I'm going to be very sad. I'm also hoping the punchline to this thing will be worth it for all of you. If not, I'm going to feel bad, but we're getting close. Anyways, so I just want to be clear on this. Like this is my this is sort of my like I love this while simultaneously like I would never actually read all of this. I tried. I actually did find just don't check for this. I did actually find some parts of this kind of like, oh man, this is kind of cool. So like I say this with love, but like in one sense I genuinely love how like impossibly enthusiastic the fandom is over this. But this is such a preposterous like example of like over enthusiasm that it's like I wish that this is directed towards other endeavors. So there's the Flesh Reading Ease 44.7 and then Flesh Kincaid grade level. So this, I believe, would be sort of like first year college, if I'm not mistaken. I'm going to do one more. I think Wikipedia probably helps us here. Yeah, so Flesh Kincaid readability tests are designed to indicate how difficult a passage in English is to understand. There are two tests, the Flesh Reading Ease and the Flesh Kincaid grade level. Although they use the same core measures, word length and sentence length, they have different weighting factors. The results of the two tests correlate approximately inversely. A text with a comparatively high score on the Reading Ease test should have a lower score on the grade level test. Rudolf Flesch devised the Reading Ease evaluation. Somewhat later, he and J. Peter Kincaid developed the grade level evaluation for the United States Navy. There's this sort of stuff I actually find really interesting, that there was a specific effort made in, I believe at least the US government, to create a standard that that said like documents need to meet this level. Like you cannot go above this, or I guess you can't go lower than this score on on the Flesh Reading Ease, and I think you can't go higher than a certain one for the other the Flesh Kincaid. Although, let's read the history. The Flesh Kincaid reading grade level was proposed under a contract to the U.S. Navy by J. Peter Kincaid and his team. Related U.S. Navy research directed by Kincaid delved into high-tech education, for example, the electronic authoring and delivery of technical information, usefulness of the Flesh Kincaid readability formula, computer aids for editing tests. Okay, yeah, this isn't quite what I thought it was going to be. But anyways, yeah, so the measure here, you start with a constant, higher weight for total words over, or no, sorry, lower weight for this one. So minus total words over total sentences. So words per sentence, average words per sentence, and minus a heavier weight to total syllables divided by total words. And then that document that we read was 44. So this is college defined as difficult to read. And then grade level, right? I mean, it corresponds with the U.S. grade level. So the sentence, the Australian platypus is seemingly a hybrid of a mammal and reptilian creature, is 11.3, as it has 24 syllables and 13 words. Lowest grade level score in theory is negative 3.40, belonging to the passage go, see, stop, rest. But there are few real passages in which every sentence contains a single syllable word. Green Eggs and Ham by Dr. Seuss comes close, averaging 5.7 words per sentence and 1.02 syllables per word, with a grade level of negative 1.3. I have seen a list which like rates some of the most difficult. Oh, here we go. Amazon calculates the Moby Dick text as 57.9. Underwater Monk's got an interesting question. Oh, sorry. I for some reason thought you were Erasmus, Underwater Monk. You've got the exact same color. I apologize for not properly saying hi to you. I thought you were an existing viewer. Yeah. So, I mean, this has been, I mean, this has probably got like, what is it? 50 years of, actually, yeah, it just had its 50th birthday last year. Actually, I think the Flesh measure predates, I think it even says it here, but anyways, doesn't matter. So this is actually, so first of all, as with any metric, you are really narrowing your it's like a map, right? You are introducing, or there's a wonderful saying. I first learned this from Jeffrey Wooldridge, not like individually. I got it from his Twitter, but like all models are wrong. Some models are useful. So I would argue that any measure of readability that takes average words per sentence and average syllables per word is probably you're missing you're missing a few dimensions there. But it's sometimes nice parsimonious models can really help you out in terms of being able to to make progress on the problem that you're dealing with. And I think in this case, the argument I would make with sentence length. So remember that sentence length negatively correlates with readability. So if I had an average, so for flesh reading ease, remembering that. So actually, you know what? Let's do a silly example and say that we were doing a work consisting entirely of monosyllables, right? So the simplest possible words that you could get. Let me just see what I can do here. To get to the 6th grade level, doing that. How am I going to do this? So for this formula, to go from 5th grade, so 100 to 90, down to 90 to 80, to just hit it at that 6th grade level. And obviously it doesn't tell you like if these are inclusive or not, because obviously you can't have something land on the same level, but you would need to have an average sentence length of 115 words and change to fall below down to that 6th grade level. And even then, that would be considered conversational English for consumers. And I'll go so far as to say that if you have an average sentence length of 115 words, yeah, that's probably hard to read. So, I mean, that's kind of the more absurd example that I can take out of this. But I would generally say, keeping in mind that it's an average, I would say longer sentences are often more complex than simple sentences. However, I would also say that on that note of saying that we don't want oversimplifications. I would propose that Hills Like White Elephants, that Hemingway short story, is a pretty simple read, like vocabulary, sentence length wise. However, it is also considered to be this famous example of a tremendous amount that is unsaid. And so, of course, the complexity is more in terms of interpretation. So, the same way that, I would probably argue that a lot of specifically modernist art. So when I say modern art, I'm not like necessarily, I don't necessarily mean contemporary. But some of those famous paintings are they're very simple. I mean, there's a whole movement of minimalism, right? But this doesn't necessarily imply that they don't have depths that people get out of them. And, as a result, I'm keeping in mind that Flesch and Kincaid developed these sort of in response to a specific need for government documents. I think they did a reasonable job of it. Like, I think if you've got an average sentence of like 30 words, and an explanation of tax documents, it's probably putting a burden on a population which doesn't always, like, you have a wide distribution of education. So Advertising actually also uses that as well. Advertising basically wants to be at that like 6th grade level. With exceptions, of course. Anyway, sorry, that just to give you an idea of how completely egregious my tangents are. The whole reason I wanted to say is that like Priesthood of Mars is one of these things I would read wikis on. But again, I one of the reasons why I know the enthusiasm for the Warhammer fandom is that sometimes I can have too much of a good thing. Why did you mention Mars?
That is where the cult of the Omnissiah originated, and where we were granted the first revelations. Many millennia ago, we made an alliance with the Emperor of Terra, and have served the Imperium ever since, paying a tribute of machinery, weapons, and void ships. Everything that bears the blessed seal of machinery comes from our hands, and it is we who make sure the operating rituals are performed as they were meant to. We are everywhere. We are the Mars-forged steel bars that give the Imperium strength.
What do you mean guard it? It's not a buried treasure. It's not a secret.
It is both a treasure and a secret. Technology is how the divinity of the Omnissiah manifests itself in this world. This is why the uninitiated may only be allowed to touch the most vulgar and mundane of its instances. We, on the other hand, are authorized to use the sacred catechism of maintenance and operation.
I didn't know it was called catechism. I thought... Oh yeah, nope, makes sense. I used to say catechism.
Although there is another reason to deny lay people the sacrament of knowledge, it can be dangerous. Twisted by renegades, the Omnissiah's wisdom is called heretic, and the exposure to it may corrupt the uninitiated. Another danger is knowledge, strangely interpreted and inscrutably twisted by the minds of Xenos. This bane is called Xenotech.
I do like the wordplay of heretic. Forbidden heretical technology spawned by the warp and chaos. So banning things you cannot understand is the opposite of seeking knowledge. Technology is merely a tool that can be employed without risk by a wise wielder. Admit it, the Adeptus Mechanicus do not wish to share their secrets because they are afraid someone might surpass them. It is as simple as that. I see. Xenotech, heretic, so very dangerous. Yeah. Sacred objects should only be touched by worthy hands.
This statement is true. What many consider chains on our way to comprehension is our armor, which we have inherited from our wisdom-blessed predecessors.
Do you hold a high position in your fraternity?
This electu indicates that I am a Magos, who has mastered the sacraments of many spheres of knowledge, and has the right to conduct services in a forged cathedral.
What is the Omnissiah in your understanding?
He is the divine mechanism, the maker of technology. The universe was made to resemble a mechanical marvel, because the Omnissiah rules over it. Knowledge is the highest form that he uses to manifest in the world. For now. Someday, he will come to this world in the absolute fullness of his splendor. The Adeptus Mechanicus worshipped the Emperor. He is the earthly manifestation of the Omnissiah, who brought humanity into the light of divine grace.
What is behind the Adeptus Mechanicus's enthusiasm for replacing flesh with augmentations?
Organic tissue is an imperfect replica of the machine, transient and vulnerable. Metal is more stable, more effective, and more durable. Flesh speak is flawed next to binaric language. Meat begets weakness, it softens the mind and undermines discipline. But you can replace metal when it wears down. In addition, a machine is a supreme form of knowledge, and by assuming mechanical form, we become closer to the Omnissiah. However, Like all things sacred, our augmentations must not be defiled by the eyes of the ignorant. Which is why we reveal only the crudest of tools, while holier mechanisms remain concealed beneath our crimson robes.
This feels very impolite, but I don't want to say an interesting superstition. I am curious to see your augmentations.
The right to witness the miracle of flesh being fused with holy metal is granted only to those who have ascended to the rank of initiate. However, your lofty status of rogue trader allows me to make a partial exception and reveal my sacred stigmata.
Pascal reverently parts the robe's scarlet folds on his chest. You see emaciated white meat gnawed through by metallic shunts and flexible wires. Blood runs through transparent pipes, enriched with nutrients required by the pallid flesh. The sight of a body transformed into an appendage to an incredibly complex mechanism built from using unfathomably ancient blueprints is mesmerizing. Every component of this machine serves the dual purpose of preserving life in Pascal's fragile flesh and preventing all threats to his well-being. The Omnissiah has been generous to you. His creation is keeping you safe from death.
The Omnissiah has been generous to you too. He has granted you understanding.
You have a strange way of speaking. Is that because of the augmentation, or does your faith dictate how you should express yourself?
Partially true. I had a voice modulator implanted alongside the respiratory purification module, but there is an additional reason. Gothic is not my first language. I am used to thinking and making statements in lingua technis. The binaric language is more informative, more ergonomic, and less prone to misinterpretation.
Binaric Lingua Technis Cant Mechanicus, a collection of dialects used by the Adeptus Mechanicus and its tech priests, can be used as a spoken language with audio bursts or as a machine code with electrical signals. I have no more questions.
Acknowledged.
I must take my leave.
May your labors be effective and fruitful.
We may not get onto another planet tonight, but I do want to... I think we'll do the Void Ship Shrine. Every ship of the Imperium has shrines. This is where the servants of the Ecclesiarchy watch over the purity of the crew's faith and fortify its members' spirits on journey after journey through the dark corners of the galaxy where unthinkable horrors lurk. So I'm partly doing this because there is a secret in this level, but I did not have another member of the party to fulfill it. So I'm a little, I'm just a little curious for myself to see what it unlocks.
Something of interest.
A power maul rests inside the glass. The inscription on the reliquary reads, "I am wrath, I am the cleansing. Whosoever wields me walks in the footsteps of Furia."
I won't tolerate weakness.
The Rex Regalia, the partially restored blade of Xanthudas the Earnest, a missionary who decimated the abominable Xenos and fell in a deathly battle against the unrighteous. Well, looks like we're short on Imperium lore.
Excellence matters.
Among the antique weapons, you spot the maul known as the Ferrum Fatum. Legend has it that its head split when it cracked open the skull of the loathsome demon Berenzar the Flayer. The Imperium Invictum, the shards of an unknown Angevin Crusade warrior's twin blades, returned from pirate captivity by the grace of the Emperor.
I rise to the occasion.
An ancient-looking chainsword without a fuel engine rests on the weapon rack. The shape of its teeth makes you think of the Ulma Universalis, a pattern from the Angevin Crusade era. Initiate Zyke, the broad-shouldered young priest, makes the sign of the Aquila. The Emperor protects your lordship. How may I be of service? I'll leave for now. I should probably investigate stuff first. The skeleton inside the sarcophagus is holding a spherical object gleaming with gold.
Follow my lead.
Okay, so I want to have some conversations. But I think I'm going to try this puzzle first. So the only catch is I don't remember
Your seneschal is always
the
there
order.
for you.
Okay.
Yes, I dare not provoke the whispers.
Well, that's definitely not that one.
Light of terror, guide our way.
Okay.
Watching the lazy handle sacred technology breaks my heart. Figuratively speaking, my cardiovascular augmentation can withstand much more than high blood pressure.
That's a cute line. I probably should have a more ordered way of... Okay.
Join me in prayer.
I figured this has got to be the last one, so... But yeah, so when you have 4 people in the party, presumably you can't do the...
What is that? I tire of idleness.
Oh, come
Let's
on.
move.
I'm just gonna borrow the reliquary. The relic. Don't worry. I promise I won't sell it. The Aquila Anima, a fragment of the Cathedral of Eternal Redemption, brought from the shrine World of Solace 6, now lost. Offer a prayer. You recite a prayer, the one you remember best. The machine in the shrine confessional emits a low hum as it processes the congregant's vox recordings. Initiate Clotus. A lanky initiate is leaning over the cogitator, an expression of extreme mental effort on his face, his fish-like round eyes peering into the screen. Grant me understanding, master. Grant me wisdom. He winces as you approach. Your lordship, how can I be of service? Who are you and what do you do here? I am Clotus, junior cleric. I sort recordings from the shrine confessional to pass on to higher-ranking clergy. Tell me more about this confessional. Our parishioners come here to repent, to share their innermost thoughts and observations of their neighbors. The sacred machine records all confessors and alters the voices beyond recognition. Is there a way to find out who made which confession? There is not, Clotus shakes his head resolutely. That would undermine the usefulness of it. The first prototype wasn't anonymous, so the confessions might well have been carbon copies of each other. Everyone was impeccably diligent and pious and whatnot. But as soon as the machine spirit started keeping the name secret, the parishioners opened up. Good thinking making it anonymous. Keep up the fine work. I will endeavor to do so, your lordship. I have other questions. What does your lordship wish to know? It appears you are having difficulties. Nothing escapes your lordship's notice. As it so happens, I am struggling to categorize these rather peculiar confessions. I wouldn't have dared tell you about them, but I think they may have been left by senior officers, which would make this a matter of the highest order, one that is far beyond my meager understanding. These confessions, you see, far from being examples of pious These confessions, you see, are far from being examples of pious conformity. I dread the very thought of dissent or heresy poisoning the minds of some of the most eminent members of the crew, but I cannot change what I heard. He bows his head in reverence. I cannot share this with anyone but the Emperor's anointed, nor can I allow anyone but your lordship listen to these messages protected by the secrecy of confession. What makes you think these confessions were made by senior officers? These parishioners are well-spoken, meaning they are used to addressing an audience. Perhaps they issue orders and are vested with power. And well, after categorizing so many confessions, I have learned to notice the subtle differences between them. Let me hear them. The initiate steps aside, putting the cogitator at your disposal. Recording 17FL2, allegation dissent, impious doubt. One question has troubled me for years. Why are some destined to perish in the warp, while others must go on living and preserve the memory of the dead? Worthier and more luminous souls have been lost, and yet I am still here. Late static is distorting the recording, but you are confident that the speaker is male. Recording 134DU, allegation theft of ship property. The orphans on the ship have already been provided with the bare essentials, but every so often I consider increasing their rations and ordering more sets of clothes for them. That will not replace the families they lost, but it will improve their lives somewhat, especially given that the ship has enough resources to cover that completely trivial expense. Despite the poor sound quality, you determine the voice to be male. You have heard the bridge officers gossiping that the High Factorum has taken personal charge of the orphans. Recording 502mm, alleged coded message, irreverence. Lop-eared Kleppas display a high degree of socialization among their kind and toward their owners. These animals adjust well to avoid ship's lower gravity, since it is similar to their homeworld's conditions. Lop-eared Kleppa meat is edible, should necessity demand it. The voice sounds muffled, as though from behind a thick layer of glass, but is unmistakably a woman's. I'm curious to know who left these confessions. Should I do? You know what? Okay. I actually don't normally like doing this. There is a side of me that wonders if, there's a quest line attached to this, but I'm wondering if the end result of this is breaking the secrecy of the confession, which is overall a bad thing. So on this one, I'm going to take a quick peek at the wiki. So it seems like there's no major consequence for it. But I also don't want to look too much in terms of what the results are going to be. So I am curious to know who left these confessions. I will seek them out. I suppose those confessions are truly special if your lordship is giving them his personal attention. The initiate bows deeply. Never would I have imagined the rogue trader himself coming to my aid. Regarding your confession sorting problem, have you come up with something, your lordship? Enough about that. I will leave you to your concerns. I labor for the glory of the Emperor and the House von Valancius.
None shall stand in my way.
Initiate Zyke. The broad-shouldered young priest makes the sign of the Aquila. The Emperor protects your lordship. How may I be of service? Who are you? Initiate Zyke, your lordship. I recite prayers and help Confessor Adalbert with the rites. What is this relic next to you? The initiate looks over at the sarcophagus. The skeleton within is clutching an orb made of many tightly fitted hoops covered in glyphs. A mysterious object, but undeniably a holy one. It was donated by a group of pilgrims who studied the legacy of the great missionary Nadine Alienkov. They believed there was something inside that only someone truly righteous was meant to have. One of the pilgrims was so desperate to witness the moment of the orb's opening that they bequeathed their body to us. Do you have any ideas on how to open this orb? One of your predecessors was the last to attempt solving this relic's mystery. It happened a long time ago, before Lady Theodora was born. That's all I know. Why not just disassemble it? To damage a sacred relic is an unthinkable crime, and to use force to bypass the test of wisdom and faith it contains is terrible blasphemy. Open the reliquary. I am going to try to solve the mystery of the orb. The initiate opens the lock and hands you the orb. Someone has already moved the hoops around, trying to arrange the letters into meaningful sentences. It will only take a few more rotations for the orb to split cleanly into 4 parts, each with its own question. The answers should presumably be formed using adjoining hoops. Form the question in the orb's first quarter. My light reaches everywhere. The greedy will see me in gold. The scholars in humanity's cradle, but only the righteous will see me within their souls. I mean, this would kind of seem to be Emperor, but I don't need... Oh yeah, no, so the Emperor in gold. Yes, the Emperor is the... For better or worse, something clicks inside the orb. Form the question in the orb's second quarter. I am within every human, and my loss is feared, for without me comes the end. But give me to the Emperor, and you will be eternal. Presumably soul. Another soft click comes from inside the orb. Form the question in the orb's third quarter. I am poison, I am perdition, I am disgrace. Burn me down, eradicate me, or perish rejected by the Emperor. Your sharp mind quickly scours the recesses of your memory for any fragments of Nadine Alienkov's sermons. You recall that she mercilessly denounced the weakness of those who have faith in the Emperor but are incapable of translating that faith into deeds. She must have despised this shortcoming of the soul more than any other. I guess that would mean weakness. With a click, the hoop settles into place. Form the question for the orb's remaining quarter. In your body, mind, and soul, you must possess me. I am no mere absence of stains. I bring you closer to him. Purity. The hoops shift and return to their previous arrangement. You will have to start over. So, I know the throne is called... I mean, let's try throne. Better or worse, something clicks. No, it's got to be life. The thing is, for me, I think the Emperor would be the answer to this one. But I don't know. We'll try the Emperor again. For better or worse, something clicks inside the orb. I'm debating on reading a guide for this, but let's see if we can do this in one more try. So I'm within every human, and my loss is feared, for without me comes the end. But give me to the Emperor, and you will be eternal. So soul feels like the religious one, but life is sort of the militaristic one. All right. Just give me a minute here. Interesting. Okay, so subreddit actually gives this pretty clear. So it says throne, blood, weakness, purity. So throne I can kind of get, like the golden throne. I don't know why the righteous would see the throne as opposed to the emperor, but this may be a detail that I don't know. Second quarter. Now this one surprises me. So I am within every human, and my loss is feared, for without me comes the end. But give me to the Emperor, and you will be eternal. The answer to that is apparently blood, and I've heard of like consuming psychers to preserve the Emperor. I don't know what the blood, where that comes from. So we were apparently correct on weakness, and we were apparently correct on purity. The orb comes alive. Its hoops shift around with alarming speed, coming together and folding into each other until the orb opens completely, laying its treasure bare. The missionary oath. Once per combat, if the wearer does not use any abilities during their turn, they can end their turn to immediately grant all adjacent allies an extra turn with 1 AP. Interesting. The initiate stares at the relic in your hand, stunned. How strange and exciting it is to behold the holy object that has lain hidden from the eye for so many years. Truly, it is a great day upon which the rogue trader himself has revealed the legacy of great missionaries to us all.
It's about time.
Yeah, so that, I mean, I would have liked to, generally if I get a puzzle, I kind of like to solve it. I'm not 100% sure how I would solve that without like really going into the, I'm not 100% sure what I would get from the game to be able to figure out that, that puzzle. All right, Confessor Adalbert, and I think that'll be where we end. Confessor Adalbert is a plump, rosy-cheeked old man, is lighting candles, taking his time with each. Glints of fire dance on his heavy golden aquila and his sky-blue eyes as he addresses you, smiling. The Emperor protects your lordship. Are you here to pray, or have mundane matters brought you to me? There's an incredibly profound quality to his voice, and he speaks with a mesmerizing timbre. Remind me, what is it you do on my ship? I am the ship's confessor, your lordship. No vessel that abides by the Imperium's laws can sail the void without a spiritual guide. Even a smaller-sized ship that does not have a member of the ecclesiarchy on board entrusts all matters of faith to a layperson who is a staunch adherent of the creed. A rogue trader's flagship, naturally, is expected to have a confessor who comes from a line of his reverent servants. I am such a one. I am entrusted with caring for the reliquary chapel and the dynastic crypt. I also conduct liturgies, consecrate the ship's bays, and strengthen the crew's hearts whenever a dark hour is upon us, lest any among them falter in the face of the horrors lurking in the darkness and fail in their duty. Tell me, Adalbert, do you visit the shrine confessional to repent as the other officers do? I always find time for penance on my morning, evening shift, and evening shifts, your lordships. Why are some destined to perish in the warp while others must go on living? An irrelevant question. His face takes on an expression of fathomless wisdom and calm. Our fates are in the Emperor's hands, and he doesn't as his plans require. The orphans have already been provided with the bare essentials, have they not? Do you mean spiritual nourishment? If it is ever in short supply, those children who are literate could use new prayer books and hagiographies, or maybe it's hagiographies, for their own perusal and to read to the others. See, it wasn't you. For a moment I had thought you had come to confess, but now I see you've taken on the role of cleric yourself. May the Emperor guide you on your quest for answers. Tell me about the dynastic crypt. Every rogue trader takes care to maintain an appropriate place of repose on board their flagship, for their capital may change with the passing of centuries, but the vessel of the Emperor's anointed serves them for millennia. It is more than just a symbol of the dynasty's authority. It is the source of its power, the Lord Captain's seat in the void whence they reign over their many lands. The Von Valancius crypt is where rogue traders and their most loyal servants are laid to rest. As the ship's confessor, I perform the rites of burial and remembrance for these honored dead. Adalbert lets out a heavy sigh. It never occurred to this old man that he might have to send Lady Theodora on her final journey, but all is the Emperor's will. I would like to find out more about this place. Adalbert smiles warmly at you. I could talk about the reliquary chapel for hours. Is this the only place of worship on the ship? Why, no, there are multiple sancta on every deck, where your subjects pray fervently and the clergy keeps a close watch on the firmness of their faith. This, on the other hand, he gestures around the glittering reliquary, is the holiest of holy places, where only the noblest among your servants are permitted to set foot. Where does this collection of sacred relics come from? Every relic we have here was either arduously tracked down by your ancestors, captured in battle against the faithless, or received as a gift for glorious deeds. A show of loyalty to the Emperor that speaks for itself, does it not? He makes no effort to conceal his pride. For our part, we keep the precious relics intact and undisturbed as we conduct liturgies and perform rites. Initiate Zayak is especially diligent in his care for the relics. Though he is of common stock, he has earned his position through dedication and piety. I want the other decks to be able to partake of this experience as well. Adalbert's eyebrows arch upwards. Truly a most generous and gracious gesture, your lordship. I will arrange for commoners who have distinguished themselves in their service to be allowed in here. An event like that will fill them with fervor, and they will pass down the memory of what they have seen to their offspring. I have other questions. I will do my best to answer them. I would like to hear the Imperium's tenets from you. In a voice brimming with solemnity, Adalbert begins. Every man and woman has their place in the order he created, and this order must be followed and the will of one's superiors obeyed. Beware of witches, for they have been stained by the warp. Persecute mutants, for they are perversions of the human form, and hate the accursed Xenos. The Imperial Creed prescribes being wary of psychers, but the Imperium needs them. You are right. Without the astropaths, we are deaf and blind. There are many other psychers laboring for the good of humanity. That is their place within the Emperor's design, but only those among them who accept his light and have been authorized. Idira scoffs contemptuously. For once in your life, could you just admit that it doesn't take a tongue calloused from prayer to handle the warp's dangers? The Ecclesiarchy tells us to persecute mutants, but an exception was made for navigators. The Navilis Nobilite are different from most humans, but their differences are a blessing. They are noble servants of the Imperium who help humanity expand its galactic domain. Do you not see that as a higher purpose that pleases the Emperor? Among the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Emperor is known as the Omnissiah. They have their own form of worship. Do they truly share our beliefs? Most certainly. Different likenesses of the Emperor and ways of worshipping him can be found across the Imperium's world, but we all believe in the one. For the purposes of optimizing the present exchange, I suggest regarding this statement as true. For a competent answer to the question, I recommend addressing this unit as a member of the Adeptus Mechanicus clergy. Come to think of it, my warrant entitles me to violate the Imperial Creed in many ways. Violate? Those are not to be conceived as violations. A rogue trader's privileges come with a duty to expand the bounds of human influence. If a rogue trader must take responsibility for unorthodox solutions or actions in the course of performing that duty, then so be it. I'm not going to say, it seems there are more holes in the Imperium's religion than the parasites on a Grox. We're not a heretic, we're an iconoclast. That will suffice for now. As your lordship wishes. You're positively beaming with joy. A priest like you is a rare sight. Adalbert laughs good-naturedly. A fair observation. Everyone knows that the clergy must maintain a stern appearance to inspire fear and awe in their flock. His mirth fades, giving way to a pensive gravitas. The truth is that my clan and I experienced great hardship. I cannot explain how it is I am standing before you now except by his will. How could one be anything but joyful knowing that they were saved by the Emperor? What happened to your clan? I was scarcely more than a child when the malady struck our cabins. First would come the fever, then the unlucky victim would start retching blood. After that, they would melt away like a candle. Only the youngest survive, myself among them. He smiles feebly. But now my family is growing, and I am grateful for each new life that replaces one loss. I'm not going to say my gentle manner may adversely affect my flock's faith. I don't actually believe that. Of course, your lordship. Did Lady Theodora come here often? Your predecessor always had due concern for the reliquary's maintenance and its needs, and under her rule, faith occupied its proper place on the ship. Adalbert gives you a diplomatic smile. People confess to you, do they not? I am interested to know the thoughts of some of my subjects. Ours is a throne-fearing flock that regularly leaves vox recordings in the shrine confessional housed in the eastern part of the reliquary. This allows us to maintain constant watch for any heretical tendencies. We can observe the earnesty with which our parishioners render their duties, as well as any dangerous dissent brewing in their minds. Initiate Clotus is responsible for sorting the confessions. He would be honored to offer you access to the confessional cogitator. I will take my leave. May the Emperor's blessing be with you, your lordship. Okay, I'm going to set up for the next part.
Victory awaits.
So I'm going to go down to the... I think it's the Astropathic Chapel. But we are at the 3-hour mark, and I have a little bit to do. I was hoping to be in bed for 10, to be honest. So I do have a little bit more that I need to do. So the indispensable astropaths are instrumental in establishing communication between worlds and ships on the scale of the entire immense galaxy. Continually exposed to the Immaterium's terrors, many of these psychers perish, go insane, or even meet a fate worse than death.
Ugh, they're staring at me with their bad eyes like I'm a leper. I'm just passing through, all right? So you lots can calm down.
So as I said before, I don't want to be too needy about this stuff, but I realize this was a pretty mixed episode just by the standards of what people maybe want to see. I know some people like I think the one slight concern I have here is that I know a lot of the digressions were not related to the game, or if they were related to the game, they were like long rants about Warhammer stuff. And I imagine a game that's this full of dialogue, it may just be worth it to advance the story a little bit more. As I said before, like, work is really, really tough, and that's going to be true for basically until September. So I'm gonna try and not let it affect the stream that much. But I'm not gonna lie. Like I was very specifically thinking about work stuff during significant parts, and I'm gonna need to find a better way of finding that balance. But I did just kind of want to be honest where some of this was I don't know, some of this was you know, less than what it should have been. Sorry, I think I was starting to say this before. I don't want to sound too needy on this. I am on the fence as to whether or not this is something that people would like to continue watching me do. I'll probably take a look at some of the numbers for the episode tonight. I probably won't make this night's episode the deciding factor, but I will say I do value people asking me about certain games or wanting to see certain games. I kind of just volunteered Rogue Trader here. There's no rule saying that I need to focus on that. I could do, you know, Planescape Torment. I could do Disco Elysium. There's lots of RPGs that are quite good and may be a better fit for the broadcast. No promises on any of those games, by the way. But this is one of 3 that or technically 4 in the rotation. So, on a given night, I am most likely to do Rogue Trader, Uncle Chop's Rocket Shop, Zephon, and I can see Zephon being one that maybe I do for a dedicated day, like maybe Mondays or that. And then I can also see doing Outlast Trials. You know, I've kind of done that sort of on a as I feel like it basis, so I wanted to make sure that that was inside there. So if there's something you think should be represented more inside there, if there's something that you wouldn't be too sad if you saw that go off, I do like listening to people saying what they'd like to see or what they'd like less of. I do also look at the revealed preferences of what people sort of stay for and don't, but I don't want to just be someone who chases the numbers. And most importantly, I'm sort of recognizing here that I'm going to be going through a time where I'm going to feel particularly distracted in terms of some streams, just because I find it hard to leave work at home, or it's at the office. So I'm trying to queue up stuff that you know, will hopefully get me, like, if I'm doing Outlast, I kind of need to focus on that. If I'm doing a game that has like a lot of reading, it's possible for me to zone out, and then I kind of just think about the work stuff. So I need to. Part of this is just a me thing, but I also just want to get an idea if I'm not feeling it on a certain game, and nobody really wants it. Like, obviously, it's good for me to rotate some of that stuff out so I can dedicate it to the stuff that people want to see. Looks like Kilgore Trout is online. So I will host him. He is playing Condemned 2, which I have no idea what that is. But as for me, the current plan is to... oh, maybe we don't need to... Actually, you know what? So I feel kind of bad about this, but looking at the number... he did comment on the smallness of the raid, and given that he is the only one available, I would rather not, like, I'd rather not just kind of go through that again. So I will do a shout out for those of you that would like to watch it. I'll leave you that link there. But I think we'll just end the stream then. Thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.